Stonehenge took approximately 20 million man-hours to build. For comparison, an average human doesn't live much over 700,000 hours. This is Jack, one of the first builders of Stonehenge. Let's say Jack lived to be 80 years old, which is extremely improbable, but it makes it easier for me to crunch the numbers, thanks. If Jack had spent his entire life, from age 0 to age 80, working on the Stonehenge project, it would have required approximately 28.5 generations of people doing the same thing to complete it. That's next to impossible. To make it more plausible, let's multiply that by 2. After all, Jack wouldn't want to dedicate his entire life to moving stones, and he didn't live to be that old. Thus, we arrive at around 57 generations needed to build Stonehenge. That's not enough room on the screen for me to introduce John, Jack's great-great-great-great, you get the drift, grandson. So it all began around 5,000 years ago with just a simple circular earthen bank and ditch. Fast forward to around 26,000 BCE, and the builders replaced that initial structure with a complex arrangement of wooden posts and brought in around 80 dolerite bloom stones from Wales, which were rearranged at least 3 times. Then, a few hundred years later, they added those massive sarsen stones, each weighing around 25 tons. These enormous sandstone blocks were transported about 19 miles to create a continuous outer circle, with 5 trilithons, 2 upright stones topped with a lintel, forming a horseshoe shape inside. It was a millennium-long building process that demanded years of hard work. So, people must have lived nearby, right? But how would they have found shelter back then? Today, we have houses for builders on site, small accommodations that serve as temporary housing. But structures like this definitely didn't exist when Stonehenge was constructed, did they? Well, actually, they existed, and some recent archaeological digs near Stonehenge prove it. Archaeologists found this Stone Age eco-home, which is a huge deal since it's one of the earliest settlements in the area. This newly uncovered Mesolithic home dates back to around the year 4300 BCE. Let's take a closer look at this house, shall we? Now, for the walls, people back then used a large fallen tree, its trunk to be more precise. These wooden walls were reinforced with flint, and they even lined the pit left by the uprooted tree with cobblestones. To create the roof, they opted for animal hides, which sounds like a wise choice. They must have provided protection against the unpredictable weather of the British Isles. Now, you might be wondering, the weather in Britain is indeed unpredictable, and it has been that way since time immemorial. So, how did the builders manage throughout most of the year, particularly during the winter months? Well, the answer is simple. There was a hearth on site, which isn't surprising, but the system they employed was quite ingenious. A hearth inside the house would have posed too great a risk, yet bringing hot stones into the dwelling was perfectly safe. While they were hot, they couldn't ignite the building. So they used these stones from the hearth as a heat storage system to keep warm at night. And as a final touch, they even incorporated various stones for decoration. They didn't exactly get a Pinterest house, but it added a touch of elegance for sure. And if you think this discovery is merely about the houses, think again. It significantly changes our understanding of how people lived during that time. This discovery places them in an important prehistoric setting right at the start of the Neolithic area, sparking some interesting questions about whether these early folks could be related to the people who built Stonehenge. But there's a big worry. Experts are concerned that this significant find, along with other buried archaeological sites, could be at risk if the authorities go ahead with plans to build a tunnel to reroute the A303 away from the World Heritage Site. Sure thing the house the scientists found wasn't in perfect shape, and it lacked some crucial elements people use for living. Some of them decayed over time, while others were simply absent. So the scientists took 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, and 3 tons of straw, and used all this to recreate the 4,500-year-old design houses. These new buildings are located close to Stonehenge, which is incredible since in this area, planning permission for even a new cowshed is problematic. So, what are these houses like? Well, first off, there are 4 of them, and they're oval-shaped. They're built on the foundation of real houses that stood there about 4,500 years ago. just around the time the Stonehenge Eco House was going up. The houses aren't very big, they're single-room structures. When it comes to dimensions, it was straightforward to estimate since we could gauge the size of the roof and the height of the walls based on the foundations. Each side measures about 16 feet. However, the roof structure remains a bit of a mystery. There were a few differing thatching techniques back then, so pinpointing the exact method used for these dwellings is kind of a guessing game. For now, we think it involves knotted or tied straw carefully secured onto a hazel-woven frame. When fires are lit, the smoke from the hearth wafts up through the thatched roof. Now, remember those 20 tons of chalk? That was needed for the floors and walls. The white chalk walls and floors reflect sunlight and capture heat from the fire. But here's the kicker. The builders encountered a challenge because the ground was so waterlogged that some of the chalk floors took weeks to dry out. By the time they should have been bone dry, they were still as sticky as chewing gum. Now, it's safe to say people 4,500 years ago faced similar struggles, and we can really appreciate what they went through while building their homes. The final layer of daub was applied using rags, giving a smooth, almost shiny finish that looks surprisingly classy. The interiors are furnished with wooden and wicker beds and shelves, along with clay pots and jars, all centered around a cozy hearth. The spaces feel surprisingly roomy and are filled with light that streams in through the thatched roof, bouncing off those white walls. Plus, the woven furniture adds a nice touch of authenticity to the vibe. The fires have been lit, and the first meal, bread crafted from flour ground on a stone mill next to the hearth, has been prepared. Those who tried the bread were pleasantly surprised by its flavor, finding it quite tasty. Now, here comes the bummer. Those who recreated the houses did cheat a little. While the materials used were authentic, the tools weren't. They used cement mixers to mix the daub, wheelbarrows to transport the timber, and logs by the hearth were split with steel axes instead of stone ones. Still, the builders aren't professionals, they're volunteers. So I think a bit of cheating is totally cool in this case. There are other volunteers on site who are more than happy to chat about the daily activities of the Stonehenge builders, from grinding grain with a quern to making rope from rushes. But these houses and the Eco House aren't the only remarkable things in the Stonehenge area. Some years ago, archaeologists uncovered a burial site close to Stonehenge that predates the monument itself. This Neolithic long barrow, dating back approximately 56 to 5,700 years, likely contains the remains of some of Britain's earliest inhabitants. The burial site was identified through aerial images that revealed its distinct shape beneath the crops. Salisbury Plain is rich with ancient sites, including Stonehenge, various mounds, and monuments. The area has remained undisturbed over the centuries, which is likely why so many ancient structures are still intact. This discovery also shows a significant shift in human lifestyle during that era, marking a transition from a nomadic existence to settled farming and animal husbandry, much like the Eco House itself. The long barrow in question measures about 85 feet long and 65 feet wide, though much of its above-ground structure has been lost to farming over the years. If this site is like others in the vicinity, it contains the remains of 30 to 50 individuals, along with cow skulls, which were significant to those early communities.
For centuries, the whole world was wondering how the giants of Easter Island moved around. Maybe powerful chiefs ordered big groups of workers to haul them. Or the elite controlled special statue-making quarries. But now we finally know the people of Rapa Nui didn't drag their Moai statues into place like lifeless logs. They made them walk. Scientists looked at nearly 1,000 Moai, checked their shapes, proportions, wear patterns, and the gentle forward lean and curved base that many statues have. And then it struck them. Those details weren't accidents, but engineering. The forward lean shifts the center of gravity, and the curved base lets the statue pivot like a pendulum. Once the motion starts, inertia helps carry each step. Think of it like walking an enormous stone toddler using ropes and balance. To prove this right, the research team built a 4.35-ton replica. The real statues were around 13 tons, and some weighed up to 80 tons. With 18 people on the ropes, they walked the statue about 300 feet, about the length of a football field, in 40 minutes. That's faster and easier than dragging something flat across logs or rollers. The old roads of Rapa Nui also help the process. They're about 14 feet wide, and the way they curve inward makes them perfect to keep a statue steady while it walks forward. Every time the islanders moved a moai, they weren't just walking it, but they were literally shaping the road as part of the job. When you look at the island's landscape today, you can actually see these paths crisscrossing each other, sometimes running side by side like alternate routes. The ancient workers were likely clearing a stretch of ground, moving the statue a bit, clearing a bit more, then rocking it forward again in a specific rhythm. It looks like they spent just as much time prepping the road as they did moving the statue itself. So, the ancient Rapa Nui didn't need thousands of workers or modern machinery, and it all worked with just ingenuity, rhythm, teamwork, and clever design. Their transportation wasn't the only Moai mystery. People knew the statues were meant to honor important chiefs, but no one could explain why the ancient islanders picked those exact spots for them. Most of the Moai sit right along the coastline, almost like they're guarding the island. So a team of scientists took a closer look at those locations, and the answer turned out to be all about water. Easter Island's volcanic soil is super porous, which means it soaks up rainfall quickly. Because of that, there weren't enough rivers or streams, and the island ended up with very limited fresh water. Hundreds of years ago, the people survived thanks to groundwater discharge. Basically, water stored deep underground in layers of rock or soil called aquifers eventually rises up to the surface on its own. When that water bubbled up near the coast, it mixed with seawater, but the mix stayed fresh enough to drink. The locals collected it right from those coastal spots, and that's exactly where they built the Moai. They weren't just decorating the coastline, they were marking the island's most essential source of fresh water. Now, most of the Moai bodies were made from volcanic tuff, a soft, easily carved stone, and most of the statues were carved in one quarry inside an ancient volcano. In October 2023, a wildfire tore through the quarry, and everyone who cares about Rapa Nui got really concerned about whether the site would survive future disasters. So when a team of scientists arrived in January the following year, a local community group asked if they could document the quarry, just in case another fire damaged it for good. The geographers jumped at the chance and launched about 30 drone flights over the quarry. Flight after flight, they collected an incredible 22,000 photos. After that, they spent months running those images through computer software that stitched every piece together into a single, hyper-detailed 3D model. Now anyone in the world can explore Ranu Raraku, one of Easter Island's most important quarries, without even setting foot on the island. Of course, the 3D model isn't just an online tour platform. The team noticed that there were several workshops inside the quarry, and carving techniques changed from one site to another. So there wasn't one chief who told them how to do it, but rather each spot worked like its own workshop that was tied to a specific family clan. This could also be another proof that the Moai could move with far fewer people than anyone once believed, probably around 20 to 50. That's roughly the size of an extended family or small lineage group on Easter Island. Most statues were carved while lying on their backs from the top down. In the most common method, the carvers focused on the face first, shaping the eyes, nose, and mouth, and then carved the outline of the head and body around those features. The second method flipped that order. They carved the entire block into the basic shape of a Moai first and didn't add any details until later. And in a few rare cases, the carvers went at the stone from the side and worked straight into a nearly vertical cliff, which must have taken some great skill. And just when researchers mapped over 1,000 Moai and thought they knew them all, the island threw them a curveball. In the middle of a dried-up lakebed, a place no one expected anything, another statue appeared in 2025. It was the first statue found in a lake bed before, and it might not be the last. For at least 200 or 300 years, the laguna was almost 10 feet deep, so it would be impossible for humans to build or put a statue on the bottom. Scientists think the Moai are over 500 years old. It's possible that the Rapa Nui people who built them probably brought the statue here when the lake was dry in the past. The new find turned out to be slightly over 5 feet tall, which is smaller than the other statues on the island. As the region continues to dry out, the lake bed has started revealing what it's been hiding for who knows how long. More statues could be tucked under those thick reeds that grew over the lake for centuries. Now that the water has receded, scientists might be able to use ground-sensing tools to detect what's buried beneath the surface. While researchers keep studying the statues and solving their mysteries, nature is playing against them. A new study shows that by 2080, seasonal waves could push far enough inland to hit some of Easter Island's massive Moai statues. These stone giants have stood through everything: harsh sun, relentless wind, pounding rain, lichen slowly creeping across their surfaces, and even wildfires. But rising sea levels already threaten the island's coast, and the Moai now face a danger bigger than anything they've endured before. Researchers built a super detailed digital model, a digital twin of a bay on the island's southeast coast. They ran a bunch of simulations to see how different sea level rise scenarios would change the way waves move through the bay. The results of these simulations showed that waves could start reaching the site's 15 Moai by 2080, and then of the most recognizable and photographed statues on the island could end up flooded. This spot sits on a big ceremonial platform and draws more visitors than almost any other Moai spot on Rapa Nui. And the danger doesn't stop there. Dozens of other important cultural features nearby are also in danger. Ancient dwellings, petroglyphs carved into stone, burial sites, old rock gardens. Basically the entire physical memory of Rapa Nui's cultural history. If the island doesn't manage these risks, it could even lose its UNESCO World Heritage status. Now that researchers understand the threat more clearly, they want to use this knowledge to help protect the island. Scientists hope to collaborate closely with local communities to safeguard Rapa Nui's cultural heritage for future generations.
There are several places on Earth, awesome and mysterious, that evoke so many questions that some people believe they were built by or with the help of extraterrestrial intelligence. Let's explore those mystical destinations. In the hills above Cusco, Peru, you'll find an ancient Inca fortress called Sacsayhuaman. Some of the massive stones of its walls weigh as much as 360 tons. They're cut and fitted together surprisingly precisely, and no mortar is used. The stones used for this construction were transported over 20 miles from quarries. But how did the Inca do it? Did they ask for extraterrestrial help? Perhaps. But archaeologists disagree. They have found evidence that the Inca used advanced engineering techniques involving ropes and levers to move and fit the stones. Okay, let's move on to the Nazca lines. You can see them in the deserts of southern Peru. In this area, more than 800 lines and 300 shapes stretch across the deserted landscape. Those are called geoglyphs and are best viewed from the sky. That's how theories about alien involvement popped up. The lines were made by removing the top layer of reddish rocks to reveal the lighter ground beneath. And this is a pretty simple technique. You don't even need to use modern tools. The purpose of the Nazca lines is still a mystery, but most experts believe that they had some ceremonial significance. Now, the stone circle of Stonehenge must have something to do with extraterrestrial visitors, right? Those stones, some weighing as much as 50 tons, were brought from quarries hundreds of miles away. No wonder many people offered theories about alien intervention. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but archaeologists have proven that the monument could have actually been built with the help of technologies available around 5,000 years ago, such as wooden sleds and rollers. The exact purpose of Stonehenge is still under debate. Its builders could have used the stone circle to track the sun or to perform astronomy-related rituals. The next breath-stopping place on our list is the Egyptian pyramids, namely the pyramids of Giza just outside Cairo. They were built over 4,500 years ago. The largest of them, the Great Pyramid, is made of millions of 2-ton stones which are arranged with super precision. The pyramids also align with the stars of Orion's belt, and this makes some people believe that aliens might have helped to build these awe-inspiring constructions. Experts disagree. They say that although the exact methods the Egyptian builders used are still unclear, the pyramids are undoubtedly a human achievement. Ramps, levers, and a large workforce were likely used to move the stones into place. Then, how about Teotihuacan, located near modern-day Mexico City? Once, it was a thriving metropolis. The city was built more than 2,000 years ago, and its size and advanced architecture make people wonder if aliens played a key role in its construction. In reality, the city was created by several cultures, including the Maya and Zapotec. It was a center for trade, agriculture, and other activities, but it does have some connection to space. Its layout, with the pyramids aligned to celestial events, shows a deep understanding of astronomy. And still, it was the work of human hands. Now, let's travel to one of the most mysterious islands in the world, Easter Island. Nearly 900 stone figures known as Moai stand there, some towering over 30 feet tall. These statues were carved from volcanic rock more than 1,000 years ago and moved across the island to their final resting places. This impressive feat, as well as the slightly creepy appearance of the figures, makes you think about some alien intervention, doesn't it? Well, another disappointment. It's believed that the Rapa Nui people used wooden sleds or rolling logs to transport the statues, and there's no evidence that extraterrestrials were involved. The last destination isn't even on Earth. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter captured an image of what seemed to be a face on Mars. It sparked numerous theories about alien activity. The face seems to be staring up from the Martian surface, like evidence of the activity of an ancient alien civilization. But more detailed images from 2001, taken by the Mars Global Surveyor, revealed that the so-called face was just a natural mesa, an isolated flat-topped hill with steep sides.
Recently, scientists made an astonishing discovery that might solve Stonehenge's mystery. They found something hidden deep within the DNA of Stonehenge's sarsen rocks, the huge monolithic ones, and it might reveal why our Neolithic ancestors designed and built this thing in the first place. Over the years, scientists have been scratching their heads, trying to figure out where the huge sarsen rocks came from. For years, they believed they came from a quarry just 15 miles away from the site, known as Marlborough Downs. At this site, they found similar minerals to the ones that make up the sarsen rocks. But it turned out there was more to this story than they thought. The understanding of how Stonehenge was built is always changing. Scientists need to really travel back in time to uncover its mysteries. Where did the rocks come from? How were they carried? Why was the site built? You see, the Stonehenge site, located at Salisbury Plain in England, is made up of two main types of stone. There are the super heavy sarsens and the lighter and smaller bluestones. The sarsens each weigh about 25 tons. That's as much as 3 African elephants stacked together. The heaviest sarsen stone, called the heel stone, weighs 30 tons all by itself. Together, the sarsens make that iconic outer ring circle. Inside that circle, that's where you'll find the bluestones. The naming might seem a bit misleading since they're not really blue. They have a bluish tinge to them when they are freshly broken, hence the name. These smaller rocks probably came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, which is about 150 miles away from Stonehenge. They're a bit lighter than the sarsens, but still pretty heavy. The altar stone, which is classified as a bluestone, is the heaviest one, weighing around 6 tons. Its original location still isn't known for sure. To figure out where a rock came from, scientists first have to study their composition. This is like checking the rock's DNA. Then they cross-reference the structure of the rock with minerals in the soil to see if it's a match. Most of the sarsens we see around southern England are actually made of a type of sandstone known as silcrete. Think of silcrete as sand that's been hardened by underground water processes over millions of years. This process mostly happened during a period called the Paleogene, about 65 to 23 million years ago. These sarsen rocks didn't form in one big slab, but in patches, like nature leaving little rock gardens all over the place. Scientists reason the sarsens spread out randomly, forming in isolated pockets. Over time, many were buried under layers of clay and chalk, which helped preserve them. When ancient builders were on the lookout for materials, these sarsens must have looked perfect for something impressive like Stonehenge. Actually, sarsens have been used in everything, from Roman villas to medieval churches, and even in things like road curbs and old field walls. One could say these rocks were the it material for ancient builders, and continue to be popular even into more modern times. This fact made scientists start wondering that maybe not all sarsen stones that were used to build Stonehenge came from the same place. They've identified sarsen sites all over the UK, in places such as Oxfordshire and Kent. After hundreds of years of studying the sarsens, geologists finally had the right type of technology to determine the origin of the stones. Now, I wish I could tell you that it was some undisclosed location very far away from the site. But, as it turned out, the sarsens were originally from Westwoods, the forest near Stonehenge. A new factor came into play when excavations uncovered empty stone holes, showing that at least 6 blue stone pillars were removed from a Pressley Hills site called Wan May in prehistory. They had a stone circle over there, and it's believed that some of Stonehenge's rocks were recycled rocks from this more ancient circle. If this is true, it might be that Stonehenge is part of a much larger landscape of ancient sites. If this is the case, then Stonehenge is just the cherry on top of a much larger scale project. Think of it as the sacred centerpiece of an entire landscape of monuments, mounds, stone circles, and things. This is why scientists want to find out where the rocks came from so badly. It could lead to why and how Stonehenge was built. Now, Stonehenge didn't just pop up overnight. It was built in several stages over hundreds of years. It's likely that it wasn't a single unified vision, but more like a big community project that evolved over time. With each generation, the builders brought in their own ideas, creating a stone structure that would last for ages. The first stage was around 3100 BCE. That's when people dug out a circular ditch and likely set up some bluestones as sort of a starter ring. Later, they added the sarsens and even topped some of them with horizontal stones to form those famous arches you see today, also known as the trilithons. These ancient builders had some challenges on their hands. How would they move the rocks? There's an old theory known as the ice road that suggests that the rocks were moved by natural icy pathways that formed during the winter. This way, they could slide the rocks down all the way to Stonehenge. But hey, if we're talking about a distance of over 100 miles, that's not too realistic. Anyways, this theory was debunked because it was warmer back then than it is today. There's also the river theory, which suggests that the rocks were floated along the river from the quarry to the site. But if we're talking about sarsen rocks, they're too heavy to float. So there goes that theory. What we're saying is, no one knows how the rocks were moved. Another interesting science tidbit came from all the research done in Stonehenge. A recent laser survey of the stones revealed the different stone working methods used, and has shown that some of the parts of the monument were more carefully finished than others. In particular, the northeast side and the inner faces of the central trilithons were finely dressed. FYI, a trilithon is one of Stonehenge's most famous shapes. It's when 2 huge monoliths receive a third one on top of them, connecting the two together. This fancy word is simply Greek for having 3 stones. But anyways, the bigger question, and the reason Stonehenge is so famous, is why it was built in the first place. Theories are all over the place, and some sound like they're straight out of a sci-fi show. So here's a rundown of the most popular ideas. There's, of course, the solar calendar theory. This one supposes that the stones are aligned with the movements of the sun, especially during the summer and winter solstices. During the summer solstice, the sun rises to the left of the heel stone, that's the lone stone outside the main circle, lighting up the entire monument. Some say it's the ancient version of a calendar, marking the year's longest and shortest days. Some archaeologists think Stonehenge might have been an ancient healing center. Pieces of bluestone have been found chipped away, possibly by people who believed they had healing powers. The theory goes that people traveled from all over to come to Stonehenge in hopes of a cure for whatever was ailing them. There's also some speculation that Stonehenge was the place to be. Think of it as an ancient gathering spot. Some evidence suggests that communities from distant areas traveled to Stonehenge for gatherings, feasts, and ceremonies. Studies of bones found near the site show they came from all over Britain, making it a sort of prehistoric meetup location. Hey, you've heard of Stonehenge? Of course you have. Big rocks mysteriously mounted in circles on a plain in England by, somebody. But what if England's Stonehenge is only a replica of another monument, and its builders just crossed the Atlantic and copied what someone had already done elsewhere? Well, it turns out researchers found another Stonehenge underneath the waters of Lake Michigan. This lake is a hotspot for woo-woo unexplained things. A bunch of disappearances, plane crashes, and now this, an ancient underwater monument that looks strangely enough like Stonehenge. We couldn't help ourselves and needed to dive deep into the story. A ring of massive stones, arranged in a way that felt all too familiar. They saw two circles, an outer one and an inner one, sitting 40 feet below the surface. But this wasn't just a random pile of rocks. These stones had been placed there, purposefully, by human hands. And by doing some further research, they discovered that they were staring at a structure that's over 9,000 years old. Think about it. This Stonehenge beneath Lake Michigan predates the pyramids. It predates Stonehenge itself by about 4,000 years. All of this information was enough to startle scientists at Northwestern Michigan University. But that was before they found this out. One of the stones had a carving, a faint but clear petroglyph of a mastodon. Mastodons kind of look like the ancestors to our modern-day elephants, but they have been extinct on planet Earth since 10,000 years ago. So, whoever built this underwater Stonehenge needed to be alive at the same time these creatures roamed our planet. This discovery raised many questions among scientists. I mean, why on earth would they go through all this trouble to lay rocks at the bottom of a lake? Well, first things first. Scientists believe that Lake Michigan had much less water back then than it does now. Second, it could have something to do with ancestral practices of First Nation people. There's one theory from a professor of the University of Michigan. He suggested that the stones formed a kind of prehistoric hunting trap. He believes that early hunters used the circular formation as a drive lane to herd large animals like the mastodons from the rock carvings we were just talking about. Once they got these huge animals into a tighter circle, they could be more easily hunted. But not everyone's convinced by this theory. Some believe the circle probably had a deeper spiritual purpose. According to local Native American tribes, like the Anishinaabe, stones are more than just rocks. They're living beings. They hold spiritual energy and represent a connection to the earth and all living creatures. An elder from the Anishinaabe community even suggested that these stones are sacred, placed there by their ancestors to honor the land and its creatures. Scientists are trying to study the stone formation in depth, like about 40 feet. But that's the problem, actually. The fact that it's underwater makes it super difficult, since they don't have the best technology. Traditional archaeological tools don't work as well when everything is submerged, but promising new technologies like stereophotogrammetry, which literally means making 3D models of a site, are helping scientists study the stone circle more closely. Still, research is slow and expensive, so it's hard to know when this mystery will come to a close. As we said, Lake Michigan is a hot spot for unexplained phenomena. Its lakebed is filled with shipwrecks, such as the Thomas Hume, a sturdy American schooner. It also collects debris from airplanes that have suddenly gone missing while flying the area, such as Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 that disappeared in the 1950s. Some people even call the area the Lake Michigan Triangle, suggesting paranormal activities like what happens in the Bermuda Triangle might be going on. The lake spans over 22,000 square miles, which means it's almost two-thirds the size of the country of Ireland. In 2024, scientists were able to access another one of Lake Michigan's mysteries, the wreck of the Margaret A. Muir schooner. This 130-foot-long sailing ship sank over 130 years ago. The discovery was announced just recently by the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeological Association, the WUAA, whose team found the shipwreck sitting 50 feet below the surface just off the shores of Algoma, Wisconsin. Built in 1872, the Margaret A. Muir was a three-masted schooner built to carry heavy cargo across the Great Lakes. Her final voyage started out as a routine trip. Loaded with bulk salt, the ship left Bay City, Michigan, heading for South Chicago, Illinois. But on September 30th, 1893, things took a bad turn. Just as the Muir approached the town of Annapolis, now known as Algoma, a sudden storm hit. The ship began taking on water fast. The captain of the boat ordered his crew to abandon ship, and thankfully, they all made it to shore safely. For more than a century, the wreck sat undisturbed on the lakebed, its location a mystery. But thanks to a combination of historical research and high-resolution sonar, WUAA searchers finally found her in May of last year. The wreck is remarkably well preserved, with parts of the deck and gear still visible. Well, just a few lakes over to the left, researchers uncovered another impressive thing. At the bottom of Lake Mendota, near Madison, Wisconsin, researchers found 11 ancient canoes. They believe the oldest of the canoes dates all the way back to 2500 BCE. Now, if you don't get why that's important, it's because you're thinking with today's head. If in a classic Midwest highway you see a bunch of pickups, then back in the ancient days you see only canoes. They were the main mode of transportation for indigenous cultures. They were used to fish in deep waters, trade goods, and travel long distances. The reason why scientists were so excited with this discovery is because they had never found any proof of what canoes were being used for in this region back then. And to understand the local cultures that inhabited the area during this time period, they needed to have some information on that. This exciting discovery was announced by the Wisconsin Historical Society in May 2024. The first canoe, which they believe is around 1,200 years old, was pulled from the lake in 2021. Then a second one was dug up in 2022. And now divers have found at least 11 more canoes along what would have been an ancient shoreline, long since submerged. One theory is that these canoes were intentionally sunk to keep them from freezing or warping in winter. It's possible people stored them in the same spot for generations. Or maybe this is just a small part of a much bigger settlement. Historians do believe there could be an ancient village hidden under the water of the lake. Divers have already found stone tools, like net sinkers used for fishing, but the village itself hasn't been located yet. Truth is, while the Great Lakes often steal all the thunder, scientists point out that smaller lakes like Mendota have stories too. The Wisconsin Historical Society is working closely with Native nations to piece together more about the lake's history. You'll need to believe me when I say there is a third Stonehenge, all the way under the waters of Lake Constance, Switzerland. I mean, think of it like Stonehenge's cousin. Archaeologists began to discover this back in 2015, when they found a line of 170 man-made stone cairns under the lake. Scientists say this was most likely the work of several villages, and that the cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose because, well, the formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide, and they can build up to 6 feet. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. So around the time the original Stonehenge was being built. Some of the facts that link them together are their construction dates, as well as the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circular format. Scientists don't know much about this site yet, but hey, I see a pattern manifested all over the world, don't you?
Stonehenge wasn't a witchy monument to travel through time. It was actually constructed as a hope to build a different future. Recent research just found out that the monument was probably raised as an attempt to reunite the Britons during a period of big division. The thread of this story lies on the altar stone, the monument's most iconic rock. For years, scientists believed that the stones used in Stonehenge, including the altar stone, came from the nearby Preseli Hills in Wales. In this scenario, Stonehenge would have been built by a local community, that is, Neolithic people who would have found easy-to-access materials to build a ceremonial mound, a sundial calendar, and a final resting place, all in one. Things changed when another discovery was made. In 2018, leading-edge research pointed that the altar stone actually came from the River Tay region in northeastern Scotland, which is located over 400 miles away from Stonehenge. Scientists found similar rocks as such in Scottish monuments. You see, the altar stone is a recumbent stone, laying on its side. Many of the rocks were found in ceremonial stone circles in Scotland, and they are unique to this region. When this discovery broke through, it got archaeologists thinking. Maybe Stonehenge wasn't just a local project, but a wider collaboration between different tribes and communities across Britain. To understand this, we need to rewind to around 3000 BCE. That's when Britain still wasn't a unified country per se. Rather, it was a patchwork of tribes such as those coming from southern or eastern Europe, each with their own customs and beliefs. As an island, Britain's population changed many times. Britain was mainly composed of farmers who descended from people from the Middle East and arrived on the land around 6,000 years ago. This group thrived in the area until 2500 BCE, when another group coming from the regions of the Netherlands and Germany started to appear. These ones, also known as the Beaker people, were responsible for the large population turnover that Britain experienced during the Neolithic period and the years that followed. The Beakers were called so because of a specific type of pottery they used to make and bury their loved ones with after their passing. It's possible that the original dwellers of the land didn't like it that their land was being repopulated. And what researchers suggest is that Stonehenge was this attempt to reunite the original Neolithic farmer population and regain some type of identity control over their land. They would have invested a lot of time and energy in bringing the altar stone all the way down from Scotland, without the help of wheel technology, for example. You see, the wheel had already been invented in Lower Mesopotamia, but since there was no Wi-Fi at the time, the Brits weren't aware of this technology until much later on. This whole territorial crisis could have driven locals to use their resources to move the altar stone to Salisbury Plain in England, in order to reunify the land. You see, Stonehenge wasn't built in one go. Its history dates to around 3000 BCE. That's when the monument was just a circular ditch and bank, known as a henge. Inside, they placed wooden posts and possibly totem-like carvings. This version of Stonehenge wasn't about rocks yet. It was more of a ritualistic place and possibly a final resting place. They found several cremation pits from this period, making it the oldest resting place in all of Britain. It was only around 2600 BCE that the blue stones came around. The naming might be a bit misleading since they're not literally blue rocks. They have a bluish tinge to them when they're freshly broken, hence the name. These smaller rocks probably came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, which is about 150 miles away from Stonehenge. Some researchers say that the ancient ones believed that blue stones had healing qualities. So we can maybe guess why they went through all of the trouble to move them from Wales to Salisbury Plains, huh? A little bit later than that, circa 2500, that's when we start having the Stonehenge we know and love today. That's when the Sarsen stones started to arrive. The Sarsens are Stonehenge's huge stones. I mean, each Sarsen can weigh around 25 tons. That's as much as 3 African elephants stacked together. The Sarsens make that iconic outer ring circle. Supposedly, that's also when the altar stone was moved from Scotland directly to the heart of Stonehenge. The altar stone is the largest of the blue stones used to build Stonehenge. Today, the altar stone lies recumbent at the foot of the largest trilithon of the monument. In case you don't know, the trilithons are the horizontal stones used to form those famous arches we see today. And here's where the story takes a twist. For nearly a century, scientists believe that the altar stone came from the same area as the blue stones, the Preseli Hills in Wales. It made sense back then. If you're already hauling stones from Wales, why not grab a special one to be the so-called altar? Except that theory started crumbling in 2018, when a team of researchers decided to dig deeper. They used advanced geochemical analysis to pinpoint where the altar stone's sandstone actually came from, and it turns out it wasn't Wales. Instead, the results pointed north, specifically to the Orcadian Basin in northeastern Scotland, 400 miles from Stonehenge. This revelation changed the whole script of Stonehenge's story. How would they move the rocks, you may ask? Well, there's an old theory known as the ice road that suggests that the rocks were moved by natural icy pathways that formed during the winter. This way, they could slide the rocks down all the way to Stonehenge. But hey, if we're talking about a distance of over 100 miles, that's not too realistic. Anyways, this theory was debunked because it was warmer back then than it is today. There's also the river theory that suggests that the rocks were floating along the river from the quarry to the site. But if we're talking about Sarsen rocks, they're too heavy to float. So there goes this theory. What we're saying is, no one knows how the rocks were moved. Another interesting info came from all the research done in Stonehenge. A recent laser survey of the stones revealed the different stone working methods used and has shown that some parts of the monument were more carefully finished than others. In particular, the northeast side and the inner faces of the central trilithons were finely dressed. FYI, a trilithon is one of Stonehenge's most famous shapes. It's when 2 huge monoliths receive a third one on top of them, connecting the 2 together. This fancy word is just Greek for having 3 stones. But anyway, the bigger question, and maybe why Stonehenge is so famous, is why it was built in the first place. You see, Stonehenge's entire layout seems to have been carefully planned to align with the movements of the sun. The monument's architecture is particularly attuned to the solstices, the shortest and longest days of the year. During the summer solstice, the sun rises perfectly in line with the heel stone, casting light straight into the heart of the stone circle. A spectacular, almost magical sight that surely wowed its ancient audience. But it's the midwinter solstice that seems to hold a special connection to the altar stone. As the sun sets on that day, its light aligns with the altar stone at the center of Stonehenge. To the builders of Stonehenge, this alignment may have symbolized more than just celestial precision. It likely carried profound ancestral and spiritual significance. The altar stone, illuminated by the setting sun, could have been seen as a bridge between worlds, connecting the living with their ancestors, the earth with the cosmos, and the present with the eternal. In a world without calendars, clocks, or weather apps, the solstices were everything. They marked the rhythm of life, guiding agricultural cycles and spiritual rituals alike. So Stonehenge wasn't just about the stones or the people who built it, but perhaps a way to honor their ancestral roots in an ever-changing world. Back in the 12th and 13th centuries, Bologna used to look like modern-day Manhattan. No one knows exactly how many towers resembling skyscrapers it used to have, but the most likely number is at least 100. The tallest of them was around the same height as Big Ben. When the towers were built, Bologna was one of the largest cities in Europe. Construction projects were massive and ambitious. Someone built cathedrals and town halls, and the richest noble families also erected towers, possibly as a symbol of status and wealth. There was no place in the city center to build grand castles, so they had to go up with the construction. They didn't actually live in those towers, but in smaller structures next to them. The towers served for defensive purposes. It took between 3 and 10 years of work to build one tower, and it was a really tedious process. Each of them had a steady foundation deep underground and a base made of big blocks of selenite stone. The rest of the tower was becoming thinner and lighter the higher it went. In the 13th century, they demolished many of the towers, and others just collapsed by themselves. Some of them were later reused as city towers, shops, or residential buildings. Now you can see only 22 towers still standing in the center of Bologna. 2 of them have become the unofficial symbol of the city, mentioned in every guidebook. Another historical surprise coming from Italy is that gladiators weren't only male. Gladiatrix were rare, but they did exist. There's evidence that several women took part in Rome's public games. In ancient texts, these women were often called ludia, or mulieres, but not ladies. Some scholars think it means that it was mostly lower-class women in the arena. The term gladiatrix wasn't used in ancient times. It was first coined in the 1800s. Women who chose to become gladiators seemed to do so for independence, fame, financial rewards, and probably debt remission. They were most likely honored like male gladiators. All this was a bit tricky to accept in Roman society at that time, and women's roles in it. At the beginning of the current era, the Roman Senate passed a law prohibiting free-born women under 20 from taking part in arena games. Emperor Septimus Severus banned all women from the arena in the year 200 of the current era. He was probably afraid that women might want to compete in the Olympic Games. It would seriously mess up the existing social order. Pineapples were once the equivalent of designer bags and watches today, a symbol of wealth and status in Britain. You can still see them at the top of the western towers of St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the most famous landmarks of London. Explorers who came back from the Americas described pineapples with so much enthusiasm that everyone was dreaming about trying the king of fruits, as it was called. Pineapples need very high temperatures and years to mature. And despite the cold and rainy climate of England and Scotland, you could see pineapples growing in any wealthy country house garden by the end of the 18th century. They even installed special greenhouses called pineries with heating systems. A single pineapple was worth up to 80 pounds, which is about $15,000 today. Of course, people would hardly eat this expensive beauty, but send it as a gift or display on a dining table until it would rot. Folks who couldn't afford to buy a pineapple would sometimes rent one to show off wealth at a party. The king of fruits became a part of various designs and tableware for the rich. Stone pineapples on gateposts and the pineapple atop the Wimbledon trophy are living memories of that time. Around 1820, there were so many pineapples imported from abroad that they started losing their luxury status. 100 million years ago, there were giant crocodiles living in the Sahara Desert. In the 1990s, paleontologists found fossilized skeletons of primitive crocodiles, including the so-called supercroc. They discovered several partial skeletons from 110 million years ago. This prehistoric giant with a head as large as an adult human was about 40 feet long. That's about 2 times as tall as a giraffe. The croc thrived both in water and on land as part of a diverse ecosystem of ancient North Africa. The expeditions to the Sahara found a whole lost world of ancient crocodiles, with some species that resembled modern animals. One of them was the dog croc. With its tall legs and keen sense of smell, it moved through the surroundings, much like a dog. Another fascinating find was the duck croc, a 3-foot-long crocodile with duck-billed platypus-like features. It was adapted for life on land rather than water. And then there was also the rat croc, a small 2-foot-long crocodile. This species had front teeth, perfect for digging up insects. These prehistoric creatures were more agile, active, and probably more intelligent than today's crocs, who are passive hunters. If noise-canceling headphones had been invented in the 19th century, they would have come in really handy. On the 27th of August 1883, the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia experienced a catastrophic eruption. It produced what is believed to be the loudest sound ever recorded. As Krakatoa collapsed, it triggered tsunamis with waves reaching 151 feet that traveled as far as South Africa. Krakatoa was an uninhabited volcanic island that hadn't erupted for 2 centuries before this terrible day. The eruption took the lives of over 30,000 people and caused extreme fluctuations in air pressure, perceived as sound. A barometer at a gasworks 100 miles from Krakatoa recorded 172 decibels. An average human can withstand up to 130 decibels of sound without getting in serious trouble. This intense pressure ruptured the eardrums of sailors on the British ship Norham Castle, which was 40 miles away from Krakatoa. The sound wave from it circled the globe, and people could still hear it even 3,000 miles away where it resembled cannon fire. The late 1800s were a golden era for grand mustaches. But there was one problem. You couldn't enjoy a cup of tea with this kind of facial hairstyle. The heat from the tea would melt mustache wax and make the ends droop. Fine gentlemen had to struggle because of it until the invention of the mustache cup. Harvey Adams, a British potter, likely invented the mustache cup in the 1870s. He patented a butterfly-shaped ledge inside the cup with a hole to sip through. Thanks to it, the mustache didn't get wet. These cups quickly became a hit, first in the UK and then across Europe. In the United States, they were sold at stores like Sears and Marshall Field's, now part of Macy's. Mustache cups came in various shapes and sizes. Some, like farmers' cups, could hold up to a pint of tea. Others were smaller porcelain pieces shaped like conch shells or decorated with the owner's name. They often came with matching saucers. Lord Byron, one of the greatest British poets, kept numerous dogs and cats and a whole bunch of exotic animals. There was a monkey, a crocodile, a fox, peacocks, a bear, and several badgers. When Byron attended Trinity College, Cambridge, college rules prohibited keeping dogs on the grounds. He got really angry and decided to go around the rules. Byron brought a tame bear as his pet. The college authorities argued with him, but since the statutes did not specifically mention bears, they had no legal grounds to remove either the bear or its owner. Byron walked the bear on a chain, talked to it, and even considered applying for the bear to become a student at the college. We still don't know how and where Byron got the bear, but when he left Cambridge, he took the bear with him to his estate in London.
Now, we wouldn't call this island mystical unless there were tales of giants living here. The island of Gozo in Malta is the backdrop of an ancient legend. Malta is an island country located in the Mediterranean Sea, just south of Europe. It's a very strategically located archipelago. Throughout history, it was ruled by many different societies, such as the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and Carthaginians. One cold night, thousands of years ago, a farmer noticed the sky turn orange, then red, when he heard a loud thump. Although the ground seemed to be moving, this wasn't an earthquake. When he looked toward the woods, he saw a giant silhouette, taller than the trees. As he fearfully approached, he realized it was a woman, a giant woman. She introduced herself as Sunsuna. Unlike the terrible giants of many tales, Sunsuna didn't want to exterminate the human race. She was loving and caring. She told the farmer that she and her people could help protect their land from invaders. The locals were pretty interested in this offer. Since Malta is located in an important commercial route, it was constantly being invaded. The story says that Sunsuna settled in Malta, and sooner rather than later, she was moving things around. And when I say things, I mean monoliths. Sunsuna carried huge stones on her shoulder to build a magnificent temple called Gigantia, which means place of giants. She even did this while holding her half-giant, half-human kid on the other shoulder. Some say Sunsuna lived exclusively on beans and honey, although others replace honey with water. The funniest bit here is that Malta is the 10th smallest country in the world, but it somehow managed to host giants. Hey, go figure. The temple looked like a giant game of Tetris, with some stones weighing as much as 20 elephants. Some of these monolithic rocks are so heavy, scholars guess it would take 50 men working together to lift just one stone. Now, as much as this is entertaining, humans never proved giants were real, so this story couldn't be true. There's a brief mention of a species of giants called the Nephilim in some ancient texts. The Nephilims would have been terrible giants that wreaked havoc on the earth and only survived until the Great Flood. But nobody ever found real proof of this species really existing on Earth, until this came along. The world of Maltese archaeology unearthed quite a few shocking things in the past years. One of them are known as the hypogeum skulls. Hypogeum is the Greek word for underground, and this incredible site was discovered in the first decade of the 20th century. Back then, Malta's National Museum director received an important phone call. Someone had accidentally dug some impressive bones and asked him to come check it out. The hypogeum looked like an underground city, filled with mazes and rooms that stretched along multiple floors. They were all made with similar limestones as the Maltese temples above ground. The hypogeum was filled with important relics and artifacts. Scientists quickly understood that the hypogeum was built as a type of final resting place for locals. So, along with skulls, they found a lot of bones and skeletons. One of these artifacts were skulls, but these weren't regular human skulls. Rather, they were of the elongated type. To make matters worse, these skulls were hidden from the public for years. People started to talk and created a bunch of theories behind it. The truth is that this discovery was a turning point for Maltese archaeology, although scientists didn't know what to do with it. Some wondered if these skulls were natural or manipulated, since they knew some cultures in the world used head binds to alter their skulls. Other scientists threw in the hypothesis of little gray people or even the legendary giants. Some say that the elongated skulls could have been sculptures that worshipped otherworldly deities. There was no way to confirm any of these theories. So the question remained: who were the builders of Malta's megalithic temples? Now let's take a look at what scientists know. The Maltese megalithic temples have been standing strong since 3500 BCE, which is even older than the pyramids of Egypt. The main dilemma here is that these temples were built even before we invented writing, yet they required advanced technological skills to exist. The Gigantia Temple seems too absurd to have been built by humans. The South Temple has a corridor with 4 oval rooms on the sides, looking like a big shamrock leaf. In one of these rooms, scientists found altars decorated with spiral patterns. It looked like an altar of some sort, indicating early Maltese people used them for ritualistic purposes. The North Temple is similar but smaller, with a very low entrance that makes people crouch down to get inside. You get it? You need to bow down to their deities in order to get into this sacred place. I mean, one can't help but wonder about the secret reasons these ancient builders had to build such a huge temple. I'm thinking they probably cast one of Daenerys' dragons to move the monoliths around. Yeah, I'm joking here. But hey, remember the entrance to King's Landing? Yup, the series used the Medina Gates in Malta as the exterior of King's Landing during Episode 3 of Season 1. Anyways, back to the giants. The ritualistic theory of the whole thing won a few points when archaeologists uncovered these mysterious figures. They're popularly known as fat ladies, These tiny statues have round bodies and faces that show how much they enjoyed life. They kind of look like a miniature Sunsana, the giantess we talked about. Scientists believe these were statues that celebrated well-being and prosperity. It does prove that the people of the time had advanced craftsmanship skills, and they were pretty intentional with their constructions and art manifestations. One of these statues is known as the Sleeping Lady. This Neolithic piece of art depicts the figure of a large woman lying on her side sleeping. After studying it deeper, scientists guessed this statue was meant to represent the Great Reaper. It was found in the hypogeum, which we now know was a huge resting place. This specific statue is different from all the other fat ladies, starting with the hair and the embroidered skirt. Then there's this statue. This is supposed to represent an 8-foot-tall woman and the rim of her skirt. She was discovered in the most unusual of ways. A farmer was trying to plow his field, but he kept hitting large blocks of stone. All the way back in 1915, the farmer called Malta's National Museum director and asked him to come check it out. Some think this is all the proof you need to confirm that Sunsana was real. Others aren't all that sure. But that's not all. The place where this giant statue was buried revealed one of Malta's most impressive archaeological sites, the Tarsian temples. The temples were made from limestone blocks. Some are 20 feet tall and weigh around 20 tons. Zamet, the museum director, kept digging and discovered multiple sites made of megalithic stones. All of them supposedly built by Stone Age farmers, all stranded on a remote island in the Mediterranean Sea thousands of years ago. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at these temples in Manidra. This is probably the world's earliest calendar. On the equinoxes, the sun passes directly through the main doorway, straight down the central axis. On the solstices, there are two superb variations. During the summer solstice, the rays fall on the edge of the megalith to the left of the doorway, and during the winter, the rays fall to the right side of the doorway. It's astronomical precision at its finest. And what about the structures in the Hall Tarsian that we've already talked about? This complex is the oldest one in all of Malta. It was built with the purpose of doing animal offerings to deities. Scientists confirm this by unearthing numerous animal bones buried in the soil. They also found a great collection of spirals, indicating that the locals also used this temple for ritualistic purposes. Overall, there are 7 megalithic temples in Malta, each more impressive than the other. Scholars keep on digging to see if they can uncover the truth, much like researchers do with the pyramids of Egypt, the lost Mayan cities in the Americas, and other sites. Rekat structure is a giant formation in the Sahara that looks exactly like a giant bullseye. It's so wide that you can see it from space. Even the CIA got interested in it. In 1965, they planned a flyover looking for geomagnetic anomalies. The findings are still classified. Perhaps the theories are true, and this place is truly the lost city of Atlantis. Now, Atlantis supposedly sank beneath the waves, but recent discoveries are pointing us in a different direction. This is an ancient story that goes far back in time, and Plato was the first to mention it. The place had loads of greenery and a curious structure: 3 concentric circles of land surrounding 2 circles of water. 2 key quotes from Plato's writing suggest that Atlantis might not have been a typical island in the middle of the ocean. Plus, Atlantis had a major influence from Africa and Europe, challenging the idea of it being in the Atlantic. It turns out that the Eye of the Sahara and Atlantis look alike. When astronauts saw the Eye of Sahara from above, they initially suspected a meteorite impact crater, but the rings of the structure matched the layout described of Atlantis. More importantly, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. It turned from a tropical region into a desert around 11,000 years ago. Researchers found evidence of a massive river called the Tamaracet that could have sustained a community. This river flowed toward the Rekat structure, aligning with Plato's description. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran through the Sahara 50 to 100 million years ago. The sea allegedly destroyed Atlantis around 11,500 years ago, likely due to a rapid rise in sea level caused by the end of the Ice Age. NASA's Worldview imagery shows patterns consistent with this theory. Those concentric rings might be a key to unlocking the secrets of our planet's evolution over millions of years. They're shaped by erosion on resilient rock layers, creating a spooky pattern of ridges and troughs. The central peak stands proud at 1,300 feet. The central part has undergone a significant erosion makeover, revealing a circular structure with a raised peak. Unlike impact craters, the Eye of the Sahara flaunts a striking balance and symmetry. Some say it results from rock uplift, sculpted by wind and water. Others think it's an ancient anticline, eroded to reveal its concentric glory. Then there's a salt diapir theory, suggesting that salt's buoyancy sculpted this beauty. Dating techniques have proved that it formed 541 to 252 million years ago, give or take a million or two. Ancient tools are scattered around the outer rings of the structure near riverbeds. Some older stone tools have also been spotted in the same areas. And still, even though some spear points from the Neolithic period have been found, there aren't many signs that people were living there back then. The area seems to have been used for short-term activities like hunting and making tools. There are other unearthly mysteries that haunt our world. One such enigma is in Norway, the ominous Hessdalen light phenomenon, also known as the Valley of Lights, leaves scientists confused. This valley is 10 miles wide. It's quite isolated, but a peculiar blue box sits high on the hillside, equipped with cameras scanning the valley. The unsettling saga began in the 1980s, when the night sky over Hessdalen erupted with burning fireballs, a recurring spectacle that sent shivers down the spines of those who witnessed it. This wasn't a fleeting occurrence, rather it became a regular thing. Terrified locals reported encounters with these unexplained luminous phenomena, some of which happened near their homes. Unease spread like wildfire. At its peak, there were about 20 sightings every week. The phenomenon made its way into newspapers, magazines, and media worldwide. Soon, people flocked to the valley, hoping to see the lights themselves. In 1984, experts joined the fray, armed with sophisticated instruments like magnetometers, radiometers, and other ometers. What they encountered was mind-bending, lights that defied explanation. Some moved at a leisurely pace, while others raced through the sky at an astonishing 19,000 miles per hour. People tried to explain these lights: airplanes, distant reflections, ball lightning, satellites, planets, meteors. But the speed and how these lights danced ruled out all those theories. We're slowly approaching another mysterious place. This is the greatest subglacial lake among Antarctica's 675 known lakes. It can easily hide unknown life forms. This lake is beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Dive about 2.5 miles under the ice, and there you'll see Lake Vostok, located at 1,600 feet below sea level. This lake is 155 miles long and 31 miles wide at its broadest point. With an average depth of 1,400 feet, it's also the world's sixth largest by volume. It's like an underwater city with lofty pillars and deep basins. The secret lake was discovered in 1993, yet it had been waiting to be found down there for over 2,000 years, collecting ancient secrets. In 2012, scientists drilled through the ice, creating the longest ice core ever. They pierced the ice all the way to the lake's surface. The year 2013 brought an unexpected twist when the tranquil waters erupted during the extraction of an ice core, mixing with drilling fluids. Then they got a pristine water sample in 2015. Some believe there might be previously unknown life forms down there, since it's a fossil water reserve that's been untouched for millions of years. That could be a lot like those speculated ice-covered oceans on moons like Europa and Enceladus. It all started with a theory in the 19th century, suggesting fresh water lurking under Antarctic ice sheets. Then, in 1955, seismic soundings hinted at a subglacial lake, and by the 90s, satellite data confirmed Lake Vostok's existence. Now, Lake Vostok isn't alone. In 2005, they found an island in the middle of the lake. Then, two smaller lakes joined the party. They suspect that a secret network of subglacial rivers might link these lakes. Now, very far away from Antarctica, in Venezuela, Catatumbo lightning presents a sinister light show at the junction of the Catatumbo River and Lake Maracaibo. This unsettling lightning phenomenon happens at about 140 to 160 nights a year, going on for 10 hours a day, and can flash up to 280 times in a single hour. The frequency of this lightning show changes with the seasons and from year to year. There was a break between January to March in 2010, causing a bit of worry that it might vanish forever. As the sun sets, winds from the east start picking up speed. The strong wind is called a nocturnal low-level jet, like what you see in the Great Plains of North America. These winds bring moisture, mostly from the Caribbean and the lake itself. This humid air hits high mountain ridges, causing thunderstorms to form over the mountains. Thanks to the ongoing wind situation, more thunderstorms appear as the night goes on. This pattern repeats itself, and is why this area has the highest annual lightning rate globally. The next place scientists cannot explain is in China. That is the Longyou Caves. They have lofty slanted roofs and sturdy pillars. The spot remained hidden for centuries. These human-made caverns, built around 2,000 years ago, decided to reveal themselves only in the 90s. Local farmers drained some ponds and unveiled 5 massive caverns. Further digging exposed an additional 19 smaller caves. They range from 60 to 110 feet in width and 26 to 50 feet in height. Archaeologists found historical relics from the reign of Emperor Zhuan of Han, dating back to over 2,000 years ago. Now, how did these caves survive for more than 2 millennia without falling apart? No ancient records explain the way they were crafted either. The walls show chisel marks, hinting at some layer-by-layer chiseling action, but the exact construction process is still a head-scratcher. Hey, if you think Stonehenge is one of the oldest stone monuments ever, well, let me introduce you to Gobekli Tepe. Buckle up, we gotta travel to Turkey to meet this really old guy. Yeah, he's too old to travel. Jokes aside, Gobekli Tepe, an archaeological site located in southeastern Turkey that dates back to the Neolithic period, around 10,000 BCE. It's considered to be one of the oldest and most significant archaeological discoveries in recent times. The site consists of a series of circular and rectangular structures made of stone pillars. Yeah, it does look like its younger brother Stonehenge. Some of those pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals and other symbols. Now, you maybe wonder, hey, why on earth did they make such a fascinating building? What was its purpose? Sorry, I got no answer for that. The purpose of the site is still unknown, but it is believed to have been a ceremonial center for the ancient people who lived in the area. The discovery of Gobekli Tepe has challenged long-held beliefs about the development of human civilization, as it suggests that complex societies may have emerged much earlier than previously thought. Okay, pack your stuff, our travel's just started. Next destination, Masada. It's an ancient fortress located in Israel on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. Hey, look at that view, spectacular, huh? It was built by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE, and it was very smartly built. Within the fortress, there were various facilities such as storehouses, barracks, a palace, and a set of cisterns capable of holding approximately 40,000 cubic meters of rainwater. People living there believed that the collected runoff from a single day's rainfall could provide sustenance for over 1,000 individuals for a period of 2 to 3 years. Access to the fortress was limited to 3 steep and winding paths leading up to fortified gates. Still, at one point, the fortress was occupied by people who had fled Jerusalem after the city was captured by the Romans. They held out against the invaders for several months, but eventually they were defeated. But these guys didn't surrender. The story of Masada has become a symbol of resistance and bravery. Today, Masada is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next flight is going to be short. We're popping over to Egypt to see the Karnak Temple complex. It's a vast ancient Egyptian temple complex located in the city of Luxor, Egypt. It was built over a period of 2,000 years and covers an area of more than 200 acres. The complex is dedicated to the worship of the deity Amun-Roka, Wait a minute, that should be Amun-Ra, and it was one of the most important religious centers in ancient Egypt. The Karnak Temple consists of several temples, chapels, and other buildings, including the Great Temple of Amun, the Temple of Khonsu, and the Temple of Ptah. Ptah! The Great Temple of Amun is the largest and most impressive temple in the complex, with massive columns, statues, and other decorations. One of the most famous features of the Karnak Temple complex is the Avenue of Sphinxes, which is a long avenue lined with Sphinx statues that leads from the entrance of the complex to the Great Temple of Amun. Another notable feature is the Hypostyle Hall, which is a massive hall with 134 columns that are over 70 feet high. The Karnak Temple complex is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's considered one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt and provides a fascinating glimpse into the religion and culture of ancient Egypt. Hey, we can't hop on the next flight and leave Egypt until we see the Pyramid of Djoser. It has another name, by the way. It's also known as the Step Pyramid. This ancient Egyptian site is located in Saqqara. It was built during the 27th century BCE for the pharaoh Djoser by his architect Imhotep, who is considered one of the most important figures in Egyptian history. People believe this pyramid is the first monumental structure built entirely of stone and is an important example of early Egyptian architecture. The pyramid originally stood at 203 feet tall and was surrounded by a complex of buildings and courtyards. It was constructed in 6 layers, each smaller than the one below it, giving it the distinctive step-like appearance. The pyramid was used as a burial place for Pharaoh Djoser and was surrounded by a vast necropolis that contained the tombs of many other important officials. The Grateful Dead? The Pyramid of Djoser has several renovations and additions over the centuries, including the addition of a limestone casing that covered the original step structure. However, much of the pyramid was destroyed over time, and today only the central core remains. Despite this, it remains an important archaeological site and a popular tourist attraction in Egypt. Alrighty, we're ready to move on. There's one more pretty recent discovery we gotta see today. The Tower of Jericho was only discovered during excavations in the 1950s and 60s. It's an ancient stone tower located in the city of Jericho in the West Bank. Just like Gobekli Tepe, this one is believed to be one of the oldest stone structures in the world, dating back to approximately 8000 BCE. The tower stands at over 28 feet tall. It's made up of 2 main sections, an inner tower and an outer tower, which are connected by a series of stairs. The purpose of the Tower of Jericho is not entirely clear, but it is believed to have served as a defensive structure or a watchtower. It may have also had religious significance, as it was located near a sacred spring. The Tower of Jericho is a significant archaeological site and has provided valuable insights into the early history of human civilization. It's open to visitors and is a popular destination for tourists interested in ancient history. Now, this ancient site even got attention from Netflix, and they made a movie where the action takes place in Mohenjo-daro. This site was a major center of the Indus Valley civilization in present-day Pakistan. Mohenjo-daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient world, with a population estimated to have been around 40,000 in its peak. Trust me, that must have been a crazy megalopolis back then. The city was notable for its advanced urban planning, with sophisticated drainage and sanitation systems, and its impressive architecture, including the Great Bath and the Granary. Mohenjo-daro was abandoned around 1900 BCE, and its ruins were only rediscovered in the 1920s. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an important archaeological site for the study of ancient South Asian civilization. We're heading to a teeny-tiny country that has quite an impressive history. Welcome to Malta. The Tsigansia Temples are a Neolithic site located on the Mediterranean island of Gozo. They're probably one of the oldest freestanding structures in the world, dating back to around 3600 to 3200 BCE. The temples consist of two megalithic structures, each with multiple rooms and altars. The name Gigantia means giant tower in Maltese, as people believe that only giants could have built such massive structures. The temples are believed to have been used for religious purposes and are considered to be an important example of prehistoric architecture. They were added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1980. Well, you must be pretty tired, but there's one more place we gotta visit today. Our plane is already landing in Armenia, and we're here to see the Temple of Garni. Look, this one is well preserved. This temple dates back to the 1st century CE. It was built by King Tiridates I as a dedication to the sun deity Mir. Sadly, the temple was destroyed in the 17th century during an earthquake, which is quite a common thing for this area, but it was later reconstructed in the 20th century. Today, it's a popular tourist attraction and is also listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, history isn't just carved in stone, but these drawings on 11,000-year-old rocks might be warning us about a freaky future. Both the Mayans and the people at Gobekli Tepe made big predictions about humanity's future. What's eerie is that despite being hundreds of miles and years apart, they used similar symbols. Now, let's get one thing straight. Ancient civilizations often depicted their deities as humanoids. You'll find humanoid representations of celestial beings in ancient Egypt, but also in pre-Columbian societies from the Americas. For example, Aztecs had an important deity they called Quetzalcoatl. He was related to the wind, Venus, and the sun. In some ancient Aztec art, he's depicted carrying a tiny handbag. The shocker is that a very similar winged figure was represented by the Assyrians. Now, it's already odd that they chose similar forms to represent their gods, even though these civilizations didn't have any contact with each other. But to draw an almost identical handbag? That seems like a bit of a stretch. Of course, now, when we say handbags, we mean carvings depicting things that look like modern handbags. Not quite Coach or Prada, but you get the idea. Some theories suggest this mysterious handbag could be related to time travel. We've seen that Gobekli Tepe tells of a great flood that destroyed an ancient civilization. But during that civilization's time, they raised cattle and grew food. They knew how to handle seeds and grow crops. According to one theory, this stylish accessory could have been used for carrying seeds. Since Gobekli Tepe is believed to be near where Noah's Ark might have been found, the people of the area could have gathered seeds to plant in the New World after the Great Flood. Strange? Definitely. But so is everything we've been talking about, so let's roll with it. Another theory on the meaning of the handbag has a much more straightforward approach. In multiple ancient cultures, the circle was used to represent spirituality and non-materiality, but the square was often associated with concepts of the earth and materiality. So, what we modern humans understand as a handbag might be an image that symbolizes the reunification of the earth and sky, of the material and non-material elements of existence. Not a bad theory, I would say. But then, who am I? Some researchers, like Graham Hancock, are not convinced with these previous explanations. For him, Gobekli Tepe is all about little gray people and their contacts with ancient earthling civilizations. You see, right in the middle of this ancient site, there's a special pillar called Pillar 43, or Enclosure D. At first glance, it looks like an astronomical calendar. You see the scorpion? That's the Scorpion constellation. And that ball in the center? It's all about the sun's alignment. We know ancient societies like the Maya or Incas were stellar astronomers. So what's the big deal here? Turns out the folks at Gobekli Tepe were talking about a massive natural disaster that wiped out all forms of life before their time. When astronomers recreated the angles and positions from Pillar 43, it showed an astrological setup from over 13,000 years ago. The stone also depicted a tragic event, a mix of a flood and a meteor shower. The headless man? That's humanity's tragic end. And the snake from the ground? Giant waves washing over the earth. And it's not just one stone telling the tale. Pillar 56 shows more of the Younger Dryas event, or as it's called, the terror from the sky. You see animals fleeing and waves crashing as the meteor shower hits. But wait, while Pillar 43 gives us the exact date of the last disaster, Pillar 18 in Enclosure D gives us the date of the next possible wipeout. The art depicted in this pillar zooms in on the constellation of Aquarius. Now, you might have seen the movie The Age of Aquarius or heard some woo-woo theories about how we're entering this phase right now. You see what I'm driving at? Gobekli Tepe might be giving us the date of the next disaster so that we have time to prep for it. These images could be a survival guide for humanity. Or not. Now, this would be bananas if it weren't for one piece of evidence. Let's check the facts. The Enki comet, discovered in 1786, used to be part of a megacomet, 100 miles wide, made of ice, metal, and rock. It broke up and formed a debris field. Now, instead of one huge comet, we've got millions of smaller ones. When the Earth passed through that debris, the folks at Gobekli Tepe saw a firestorm of comets, all coming from the Aquarius constellation, just like on Pillar 43. Now, here's the supposed scary part. We pass through that same debris field every year. If you're watching this in September, October, or November, we're flying through it right now. It could happen that these debris fall onto the surface of the Earth all over again, repeating history. But so far, that's just a theory. The mind-boggling question is, how did the people at Gobekli Tepe know about an event that happened before they were all born? In 2019, excavations kicked off at Karnak Temple, about 40 miles from Gobekli Tepe. But research suggests it might have been settled even earlier. Gobekli Tepe seems to have been a place of worship or an observatory, but Karnak Temple shows signs of a structured society. Excavations at Karnak Temple reveal artifacts like intricate carvings, tools, and even possible remnants of buildings. This suggests that these people were not just hunters and gatherers, but had a structured society with spiritual or ceremonial practices. In 2020, researchers started unearthing several other settlements in the area, indicating that Gobekli Tepe was part of a huge metropolis. The whole site is known collectively as Tas Tepler. The thing is, the math around all this has scientists baffled. Around that time, Earth was just leaving its last ice age, and scientists used to think Stone Age civilizations were primitive. But evidence keeps showing up, proving that wasn't the case. For Gobekli Tepe to have existed with that level of tech 12,000 years ago, there must have been an even earlier civilization. That kind of tech doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. And hey, we've got plenty of other proof of advanced societies. Take the Mayans, for example. Recent discoveries have shown they were even more advanced than we previously thought. They built massive cities with roads up to 130 feet wide, painted white to guide travelers at night, a feat you'd expect in places like Portugal or England. These roads, sometimes elevated over swampy ground, formed a network of over 964 settlements, like a giant spider web. A bunch of scientists turned their eyes on this theory, but it could be the connecting point of everything we've been speculating about in this video. After all, the people from the sky could have come down and told the people from Gobekli Tepe about the destruction of a more ancient civilization than theirs. Or not. Remember, don't give up your critical thinking just because you see something on the internet. Anyway, Gobekli Tepe raises suspicions just as Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Egypt. When we mix little green aliens into the equation, it explains one way that surreal engineering feats were possible in these sites. But it also underestimates our human ancestors and their thinking abilities. One of the main characteristics of Gobekli Tepe's architecture are the T-shaped pillars. The heaviest of them weigh 20 tons and are around 20 feet. These pillars were erected perfectly, without so much as a dent in them. Sure, that's pretty hard to do without modern machines. But hey, maybe they figured it out and built it after much effort. Now, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, this old pal is supposed to have cracked the secret of the pyramid builders in modern-day America. He used it to build his own castle and other mesmerizing structures. So, hey, I guess we'll have to keep digging to find out the actual facts about it all, huh?
Have you heard of Gobekli Tepe? It's an ancient site in Turkey that literally made historians rewrite history books. Over 11,000 years ago, a group of prehistoric humans crafted an enigmatic masterpiece that's even older than Stonehenge. Before its discovery, archaeologists believed that people didn't know about iron and weren't good at making pottery. They were sure that settled life only emerged with the need for agriculture. But Gobekli Tepe changed this belief. The place has revealed that it was the temple that paved the way for a settled life, not agriculture. Until this discovery, researchers believed that farming was the catalyst for sedentary living. Meet Professor Schmidt, the guy whose findings changed this theory. He managed to prove that hunter-gatherer communities laid the very foundations of this way of life. Back in the 1960s, other archaeologists visited the area, but they totally missed the mark. While surveying the region, they stumbled upon a hill with scattered limestone slabs and concluded it was just an old burial ground from medieval times. Little did they know that there was so much more to uncover. In 1994, Schmidt embarked on his own survey of prehistoric sites in the area. Surprise! He instantly realized he had discovered something truly extraordinary. Unlike the nearby flat and barren plateaus, Gobekli Tepe had a gently rounded top, rising 50 feet above the surrounding landscape. Funny enough, the translation of this place's name is Potbelly Hill. Schmidt was sure only humans could have made something like this. Those broken limestone pieces that were mistaken for gravestones turned out to be way more exciting. It was like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. The pieces took on a whole new meaning, and Schmidt with his team was about to dive into the secrets waiting beneath the surface. To their surprise, they found no traces of a settlement, no hearths for cooking, no houses, and none of those adorable clay figurines commonly found in nearby sites of similar age. However, they uncovered that those ancient people used tools like stone hammers. So, Schmidt and his team put their heads together and took a wild guess at the age of Gobekli Tepe's stone structures. Their estimation got backed up by some limited carbon dating done right at the site. The ancient vibes of this place were finally starting to make sense. It was like a puzzle slowly coming together. You may think that back then, people didn't have special tools to create something as cool as Gobekli Tepe. Not true. Turns out, these prehistoric folks used flint tools instead of fancy metal chisels. They were also skilled at chipping away softer limestone and crafting pillars right on the spot. Afterward, they carried the pillars a short distance to the summit and placed them upright. Once the stone rings were complete, they covered them with layers of dirt. Over time, they added new rings, and voila! You've got a cool hill to impress people in the future. During their first year of excavation, the team went through 15,000 pieces of animal bones from wild creatures. These people didn't have pet animals or grow their own food. They hunted wild animals for their meals. But things were about to change, because the place had everything they needed to start farming. Scientists say they had wild sheep and wild grains that could be domesticated. And guess what? Just 20 miles away, geneticists found evidence of the world's oldest domesticated strains of wheat at a prehistoric village. These amazing findings have completely changed how we view civilization. In the past, experts believed that people needed to learn how to farm and settle in one place before they could build temples and develop complex societies. But guess what? Schmidt's research flips that idea on its head. He claims that the incredible effort put into constructing these astonishing structures actually set the stage for the development of advanced societies. It means that societal and cultural changes happened before agriculture. Schmidt has this fascinating hypothesis about Gobekli Tepe. He thinks it could have been a special burial site where people left their loved ones. And here's the twist. The burial site was adorned with fancy statues and symbols representing deities from the spiritual realm. The idea that Gobekli Tepe could have served as a sacred place adds another layer of complexity to the whole story. While the site's true purpose may remain elusive, Schmidt's insights invite us to consider the profound interplay between life and the afterlife, and the deep reverence ancient hunter-gatherer societies may have had for their departed ancestors. Now let's talk about the stars of the show, the mesmerizing T-shaped columns that dominate Gobekli Tepe. These mysterious structures range from 10 to 20 feet tall and most likely represent stylized human figures. But one figure stands out from the rest, the three-dimensional lion relief. This depiction really fires up our imagination. Why? Because it hints at the possibility that lions roamed Anatolia during the Neolithic period. These standing stones are arranged in circles and placed in rectangular pits. Each circle has a similar setup. Two big T-shaped pillars in the center, surrounded by slightly smaller ones facing inward. Talk about a stylish arrangement. These towering pillars reach a whopping 16 feet and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some pillars are plain and simple, while others are like works of art with intricate carvings. Foxes, scorpions, and vultures come to life, crawling and twisting on the pillars' sides. But it's not just animals depicted on these stones. Some pillars have abstract shapes representing humans, and even small carvings of clothing items. Some of them even have belts. Now, there's one pillar that stands out from the rest like a rock star. This super old stone pillar suggests that a comet crashed into Earth. It happened during a chilly period that lasted about 1,000 years. Previous studies examining Greenland ice cores hinted at this comet theory, but now the carvings at Gobekli Tepe prove it right. The carvings on the pillars are like a historical comic strip. They even show a headless human figure. Researchers fed the images into a computer and discovered their connections to constellations, indicating that this temple might have been an ancient observatory. It's like our ancestors were trying to document this cataclysmic event in their own unique way. Archaeologists have been excavating and researching Gobekli Tepe since the mid-1990s, peeling back layers of history and providing us with a deeper understanding of the intricate relationship between various elements. They have no plans to stop the whole process for another 150 years. Who knows what else they'll find? You see, Gobekli Tepe has been labeled purely as a ritual site with no signs of domestic activities. We were led to believe that the absence of water meant it couldn't support semi-sedentary communities. But scientists believe it's time to shake things up and approach Gobekli Tepe with fresh eyes. It's time to question what we believed before and use new evidence and different ways of thinking. Like, there might have been a group of people living in the area who didn't stay in one place all the time. They moved around a bit but still had their own civilization, living in the area semi-sedentarily. Gobekli Tepe is not just home to a single temple, but an astounding collection of over 20 ancient structures. As archaeologists delve into the depths of this wonder, they are unraveling its unique layout, featuring two prominent focal points at the heart of each establishment, complemented by smaller structures and dividing walls. What's even crazier is that in this area, there are over 200 obelisks, which are narrow tapering monuments.
Experts found the oldest lakeside village ever discovered in Europe underneath the waters of Lake Ohrid in Albania. The lake itself is ancient too. It's said to be one of the oldest lakes in the world. Before this discovery, a village in the Italian Alps held the record. It was about 7,000 years old. But radiocarbon dating shows that the village under Lake Ohrid was built between 6,000 and 5,080 BCE, which means it's around 1,000 years older than any other village in Europe. Around 200 to 500 people lived in this village. It goes back to the time of the Neolithic period. In fact, these people were likely one of the first ever communities that decided to settle down. This discovery wouldn't be so interesting if it didn't have an enigma. Villagers made a wooden fortress of spikes all around their village to stay safe. But safe from what? Something mysterious. These locals went through all the trouble of building their homes on stilts over the lake and surrounding it with spikes for defense. Why did they make things so complex? That's what archaeologists are trying to figure out. Are there any other unusual settlements? Sure thing. For example, Gobekli Tepe. This place takes us back to the very beginning of permanent settlements. It also makes us question everything we thought we knew about how organized societies started. It seems like the fellas who lived there were into something pretty special, like rituals or hanging out together as a community. Around 11,000 years ago, ancient humans carved huge blocks of limestone and somehow managed to drag them to the other side of the mound. These blocks were like canvases painted with images of animals and people. They were placed in circles. Underneath these stones, you'll find the same massive pillars as the ones from the other side of the mound. Around 250 of these pillars hang out on the surface, and researchers also found around 60 of them during the dig. These are like messages from the past, telling us about people who once lived here and the stuff they were up to. These findings challenge traditional timelines and interpretations of early human society. While Gobekli Tepe has gained popularity among tourists, there's another site nearby, Karnak Tepe. It remains lesser known, but equally significant. Both sites challenge the belief that animal farming led to settled life. In fact, it appears people became sedentary first, and then they started animal domestication. They also question the traditional idea that organized societies followed the development of agriculture. These ancient sites suggest that organized communities existed before agriculture, possibly with cultic or communal rituals. These structures suggest complex, multi-purpose functions rather than just religious ones. People gathered in these places for discussion and storytelling, fostering a collective identity. These buildings might mark the beginnings of a cohesive community, showing the emergence of horizontal hierarchies and knowledge sharing. Let's move to the other side of the world. Mexico's 1,500-year-old unknown pyramids are worth talking about. These pyramids have stood strong for all these centuries, all thanks to a secret ingredient from the prickly pear cactus. With its help, indigenous builders crafted these ancient marvels. Gray volcanic rock pyramids rise like a mini mountain range. As we get closer, it becomes clear that skilled hands etched identical steps into the hard rock, forming a staircase of the largest pyramid. The two smaller pyramids, called the House of the Wind and the House of the Longest Night, share the same human touch. Legend has it that these structures hid treasures. But it wasn't until Mexican archaeologists started digging there in the early 2000s that the secrets began to unravel. The House of the 13 Heavens was built around 540 BCE to keep track of time. After all, it wasn't so easy for ancient people to keep track of dates in the days before clocks and calendars. Instead, they looked at the skies and celestial objects. Think of the pyramid as their own cosmic calendar. Its corners matched up with solstices and important dates for planting and harvesting. When you stand on the steps these days, the sun lines up perfectly with the corresponding corner. But these pyramids aren't just about telling time. Quiroz and Zapata, archaeologists on a mission, are trying to piece together the clues. They've recovered a few artifacts, and that's how they've learned that the ancient builders used the sticky substance from prickly pear cactus leaves to hold their creations together. This ancient technique is still used by some indigenous people today. One surprise after another. The House of the 13 Heavens reveals a skeleton older than the pyramid itself, nearly a millennium older. This means that people carried this body with them for 950 years. It's another mystery. The next stop is Duna de Bolonia. It's a Spanish sand dune hiding Roman ruins. This sand pile is near the edge of Europe, reaching out toward North Africa. It's more than 98 feet tall and 656 feet wide. As the winds move and the dune shifts, it reveals pieces of history hidden deep within it. Climate change boosts those winds, moving the dune even more. As it migrates, it shows us traces of people who used to live here. Archaeologists have been busy digging around, and they've found ancient tombs. Imagine exploring a sandy maze and stumbling upon these tombs filled with history. The sand has acted as a protector, preserving bones, jewelry, and arrowheads. But that's not all. Nearby, there's an archaeological site from the 2nd century BCE. That's when the Romans were hanging out here. They had a whole city down there, complete with baths, a theater, and a temple. And it was built on top of an older Phoenician settlement. An earthquake shook things up a long time ago, and people left the city. For centuries, it lay hidden under the sand. Modern historians and archaeologists are excited about what else this shifting landscape will reveal. Fingers crossed that this sandy time capsule stays safe and keeps sharing its stories with generations to come. In Peru, archaeologists are exploring the 3,000-year-old Condor's Passageway. A what? Okay, so archaeologists were digging around a place called Chavan de Huantar, where the Chavan people lived. This place is around 190 miles away from Lima, Peru's capital. So, the Chavan people were advanced artists. They loved drawing birds and wild cats in their paintings. And they went way back, even before the Inca Empire became a big deal. They were some of the first societies that settled down and started farming in Peru's highlands of the Andes Mountains. That's more than 2,000 years before the Incas showed up. Archaeologists found a secret passage in one of the temple buildings. They called it the Condor's Passageway. It was a hidden hallway that had been locked away for ages. Lara Croft would love it there. This passage leads to other rooms inside the temple. It gives us a peek into what life was like then. Inside this hidden hallway, the researchers found some neat stuff. Like a big piece of pottery weighing as much as a big bag of potatoes and decorated with a drawing of a condor's head and wings. The condor, by the way, is a power symbol for the ancient Andeans. Archaeologists also found some pottery. All of this stuff was discovered in May 2022 when the entrance to the hidden passage was finally opened. Pretty new. The temple complex where they found these ancient items has other structures, like terraces. And there's still more to uncover. The tricky thing is going forward in these hidden passages. The archaeologists had to send in cameras mounted on robots to explore them first. They didn't want to risk messing up the ancient building or, getting stuck in there. Let's wait and see what else they'll uncover.
Whenever you hear about ancient ruins, you almost never picture them being suspended somewhere, or just randomly hanging on the branch of a tree, right? In fact, for most of the ancient artifacts we have exposed in museums all over the world, archaeologists did quite an impressive amount of digging. You see, buildings have this funny way of fading away over time if not properly taken care of. Sometimes we need to reuse some building materials, so an older construction may be sacrificed in the process. Other times houses are abandoned, and once they are exposed to the elements on the surface, like rain or sunlight, they don't really stand a chance. Some just simply crumble away due to good old erosion. So the only way a piece of architecture can survive the test of time is if it's somehow gotten buried deep down. Now, how did they end up buried in the first place? Well, it's quite the comedy of errors. Ancient cities had a habit of gradually raising their ground level like a kid adding toppings to their ice cream sundae. You see, these settlements were always busy collecting food and building materials to keep up with their ever-growing population. But hey, who has time to deal with waste and rubbish? It wasn't exactly high on their to-do list back in the day. So when it came to building new houses, ancient civilizations found it much easier to save their sweat and tears by piling up the rubble and constructing right on top. But that's not all. Rivers would also occasionally flood and deposit a layer of sediment on the city floors, further encapsulating those ancient constructions. And in those dry regions like the desert, where the wind likes to show off its sand and dust dance moves, you can bet it was a constant struggle to keep the establishments clean. One hilarious example is the Sphinx, which had its head buried in sand until a group of archaeologists unearthed it in 1817. Some ancient towns eventually got covered up because they were completely abandoned. With less human activity to control their expansion, plant seeds couldn't resist the opportunity and sprouted all over the place. They gobbled up carbon dioxide from the air and grew, adding more and more bulk to the ground. Those cheeky roots even decided to stabilize the soil made from decaying plant matter, creating layers upon layers of earthy goodness. It's like the ultimate DIY project Mother Nature embarked on, with plants as her loyal helpers. The act of digging into the secrets of ancient civilizations is not just about unearthing a lost world. It's also an epic quest to reveal the hidden treasures beneath layers of history. But how do archaeologists know where to dig in the first place? If everything is covered in layers upon layers of sediments, debris, and plant roots, they must have some sort of system they rely on before embarking on a new project, right? For starters, they're not always the ones suggesting an archaeological dig in a certain location. Let me explain. Let's say you're a contractor and you want to build a new fancy apartment complex in your city. Some local legislations have certain requirements before your project can start, though. For instance, before anyone starts building on a piece of land, they might need to bring in specialists to check the soil. These clever folks can be archaeologists, geologists, or paleontologists, and they need to keep an eye on things during development. If any artifacts or ecofacts, fancy word for organic remnants, are discovered, these experts swoop in to excavate and study them. But what about sites that have nothing to do with bulldozers and yellow hats? Archaeologists have more than one trick up their sleeves when it comes to locating ancient hotspots. They dive deep into historic records with a healthy dose of detective work. By sniffing out old documents and maps, they can piece together the puzzle of human activity in a specific area. If a site has been visited before, it's even better. Finding records of past excavations or historical accounts can give archaeologists lots of information on where to continue their treasure hunt. Before archaeologists start swinging their shovels, they engage in a bit of a visual scan mission. Armed with a grid system, they'll stroll around the site, keeping their eyes peeled for any artifacts that might be hiding just beneath the Earth's upper layer. From groundstone tools to historic glass and even ancient garbage dumps, yes, they're all so valuable. These keen-eyed explorers can spot signs of human activity faster than most people. If they stumble upon midden soil, fancy term for a garbage dump, they know for sure that humans once called this place home. Archaeologists don't just rely on their trusty shovels, though. They have an arsenal of gadgets to aid in their search for hidden wonders. Geophysical tools are like their secret weapons. Take the resistivity meter, for example. This clever contraption measures the electrical component of the soil and any buried features or artifacts. A buried wall, for instance, will create a different resistivity reading than the surrounding soil. Magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar work in similar ways, showcasing potential hints of ancient treasures in the soil. And who could forget our trusty old friend, the GPS? It helps archaeologists map out precise locations, like a high-tech treasure map, leading them straight to their pot of gold. Care to virtually visit some of the most important archaeological sites in the world? Well, follow me. In the United Kingdom, for instance, you'll find this interesting place called Stonehenge. It's one of many henges scattered around, but this one really takes the cake. Picture this: massive ancient stones standing tall and proud, arranged in a funky outer ring and an inner horseshoe, with some smaller stones thrown in for good measure. And guess what? These amazing stones have been around for over 5,000 years. Talk about a serious case of rock-solid longevity. Now, here's where it gets interesting. According to local folklore, the legendary wizard Merlin whipped out his magic wand and poof! He teleported these massive stones all the way from Ireland. Apparently, some giants had assembled them there, but Merlin decided they would look much better at their new location. Others think it's just the ruined remains of an old Roman spiritual edifice. These amazing structures were built by our Bronze Age ancestors. With their simple tools and limited tech, they managed to create this monumental masterpiece. Impressive, right? Unfortunately, there's still so much we don't know about this area. Stonehenge's initial purpose remains a mystery to this day. Sure, there are lots of theories, but scientists have yet to agree on the subject. However, we do know that it's perfectly aligned to catch the sunrise during the summer and winter solstices. The ancient city of Pompeii is an equally amazing archaeological site. Picture this. Mount Vesuvius, a notorious troublemaker, decided to throw a volcanic tantrum and completely covered this ancient Roman city. It turned it into a time capsule, located outside present-day Naples in Italy. Fast forward to the year 1748, when a bunch of adventurous explorers stumbled upon Pompeii. Lo and behold, they discovered a treasure trove of well-preserved goodies: streets, houses, food, probably a bit stale by then, blingy jewelry, fancy sculptures, colorful frescoes, everyday household items, and even animal and human remains. It was like an epic archaeological party. From the looks of it, Pompeii had it all. Fancy houses and villas, a massive 20,000-seat arena, cute little artisan shops, hangouts like taverns. And let's not forget the saucy spots like those luxurious bathhouses for some intense pampering. There's also the Sanctuary of Apollo, where people used to gather for their daily dose of worship. And of course, the bustling heart of the city, the Forum of Pompeii, where all the cool people used to hang out. And guess what? Pompeii is so cool that it made it to UNESCO's World Heritage List back in 1997. That's like the ultimate Hall of Fame for historical awesomeness. It also includes many other famous buildings and sites, like the Taj Mahal in India and the Acropolis of Athens in Greece.
You are lost deep within the jungle in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There are strange noises all around you, and to make it worse, the sun is setting. Soon, you'll be alone in the middle of an unknown rainforest. Guess it was a pretty bad idea to come looking for El Dorado on your own, wasn't it? You keep walking as fast as you can, when suddenly, wait! What's this you're seeing? It looks like large stairways made out of stone. This definitely doesn't look natural, so you take a picture. Maybe you didn't strike gold, but you might have just found something relevant. Congratulations! You found Akamtun, a long-lost Mayan city, hidden 37 miles into the jungle. The name literally translates to stone column. Stone was probably in at the time, so these guys used a lot of it to build their pyramids, houses, and even ball courts. If you ever thought that Europeans invented ball games, think twice. Mayans loved to play ball games for recreational purposes. Akamtun is part of a series of other long-lost Mayan cities that are being discovered with the help of new technology nowadays. We'll talk more about the other ones in a jiffy. Perhaps the biggest surprise of this one is that it was surrounded by wetlands, which is why the city was built on high ground. The city was monumental, covering an area of over 120 acres. That would be as big as 90 football fields right next to each other. Scientists have found proof that Akamtun had pyramids of up to 49 feet high, and that it was likely an important social hub between 250 and 1000 CE. This is definitely a game changer. But lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the 19th century. Modern technologies, such as LiDAR imaging, help archaeologists see through dense canopies of the forests. This means that people don't really have to risk getting lost in the tropical jungle like you did at the beginning of this video. LiDAR works sort of like an X-ray. It sends out laser beams that can detect any signs of ruins or ancient constructions. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parchak, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in South America, Egypt, and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any signs of where there could have been cities long ago. She says that more often than not, what happens is that ruins are covered by vegetation, soil, or sand, which makes them super tricky to find. But thanks to these awesome tools, scientists also made the huge discovery of ancient Mayan causeways, which spread throughout old Mayan territories. I mean, take a look at these roadways. You'd expect to see ruins like this in places such as Portugal, England, or the United States. I'm talking about 130 feet wide roads painted white to help travelers journey through the nighttime.
Scientists recently unearthed a 110-mile network of roads such as these, and they think this dates back to before the first registered Mayan highways we've known so far. These roadways, which sometimes ran over the swampy ground and were even elevated at times, are being called the world's first superhighways. Even if there is no registry of animal-powered vehicles, it's believed that the Maya used them to travel around a network of possible 964 settlements. They were built like a huge spiderweb, and from what archaeologists have gathered, this huge system of roads worked to connect a big system of economic and social interactions between Mayan cities. This completely debunks the traditional idea that the Mayan pre-classic period, which dates back to 2000 BCE, was made of small, tribal settlements. Imagine the manpower and engineering ability you need to muster to build something close to these white highways. Scientists believe that these causeways were built pretty much the same way as the Mayans built their pyramids, with a mixture of mud and quarry stone. Oh, and using several layers of limestone to make them white. That's pretty cool, right? But let's take a few steps back for a moment to get some context. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. Until now, experts believe that at its apex, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities, with a population of millions of people. That's a lot of folks. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. And they survived mainly on agriculture. The thing is, the Yucatan Peninsula was an extremely difficult place to grow crops. So the Mayans had to develop a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, and plazas. The Mayans might have been keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets such as Venus and Mars, as well as the exact dates of eclipses. If you've ever seen examples of ancient Mayan cities, this is Tikal. Located at the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan conquest state. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It's composed of a series of complex monuments. The North Acropolis is one of Tikal's most ancient complexes of monuments. Built solely by human hands around 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Its monuments are up to 200 feet high. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. Then there's Chichen Itza. It's got one of the best preserved pyramids on Earth to date. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 4 square miles of land. The highlight is El Castillo, a tremendous step-like temple standing 80 feet above ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps up each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same number of days as the solar year. You can see that these folks were a pretty big deal, huh? That's why nobody can really understand what happened to them. There's a big lack of evidence on the decline of this almighty empire. What could have been the cause of their demise? Was it a drought? New research in 2017 did bring some new discoveries into the mix. Using data from a site at Ceibal, located at southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the unexpected demise of this great civilization. The information shows that instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely fell in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. It's hard to pinpoint the exact causes, though. But hey, recent discoveries are shedding a big light on humanity's past. Not only about the Mayan Empire, but about other long-lost civilizations of South America. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done using satellite imaging technology and is also shocking scientists. Some images from near the Xingu River, also in the Amazon, suggest that cities of millions of people might have existed inside the jungle, way before our modern civilization ever existed. I mean, if this doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. Satellite imagery also detected a network of trenches dating back to 200 and 1200 CE in the Bolivian Amazon forest. These proofs suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people right in the middle of the Amazon forest. When researchers from the University of Florida went on ground to check the satellite information, they were shocked to find several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans. In February 1961, 3 adventurous rock lovers were searching for geodes near Olancha, California. They took one of their findings home and studied it because it looked pretty unusual. They managed to cut through the matrix and discovered something unexpected inside. Instead of the usual mineral formations, it had a cylindrical object resembling porcelain inside. There was a metal shaft at its center, and around it, a hexagonal sheath made of copper and some unidentified substance. Its discoverers were hoping they had found an example of some unknown technology from 500,000 years ago. It could be proof that there was a hyper-advanced ancient civilization like Atlantis, or that time travel was real. Maybe someone came all the way from the future and accidentally dropped the item. Or maybe some intelligent extraterrestrial beings brought it when visiting Earth. If any of these theories were true, it would mean that scientists have to completely rewrite all human history as we know it. But not everyone shared the excitement, and truth seekers and alternative archaeology circles were trying to solve the mystery of the so-called Koso artifact until the late 90s with theories and debates. Then a group of skeptics took images and x-rays of the discovery and showed them to spark plug collectors. They have identified the artifact as a spark plug with corroded metal components from the 1920s and not ancient technology at all. Almost 20 years later, one of the co-discoverers of the artifact agreed to take it for inspection at the University of Washington. They officially confirmed it was a 1920s-era champion spark plug. And the stone matrix containing the artifact wasn't a geode, but a concretion. Those can form because of natural processes over decades or years, but not millennia. The Koso artifact is a good example of an out-of-place artifact, which is a thing in pseudo-archaeology. It's something found in a place or time where it shouldn't logically be. These artifacts seem too advanced for the time period they're found in. They could also mean human activity existed when humans weren't supposed to be around. The Baghdad Battery is another example of such an artifact. It was found in the 1930s by a German archaeologist and consists of a clay jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod going through the jar's stopper. Its top, which was broken off, probably had been sealed with asphalt. Its discoverer noticed that it had 2 different metals and possibly an electrolyte, which are key components of a battery. There are no ancient writings to support this theory, but when scientists ran tests and filled it with an ionic solution like vinegar or wine, it showed that it could conduct electricity. If it really was a battery from 2,000 years ago, it might have been used in ancient medical practices, or even embedded in statues to make it look like they were buzzing to impress people. Kionich, who found it, believed it was used for electroplating, a process for coating metals. Even if it was used as a battery, the Baghdad artifact could only produce a small amount of energy, around 1 volt of electricity. So, some people believe it was used as a storage container for sacred scrolls. Back in the 1930s, a couple stumbled upon something strange while walking along Red Creek in London, Texas. It was a piece of wood sticking out of what looked like an ancient rock formation. Around a decade later, their son, who was really curious to find out its secret, decided to crack open the rock and found a surprisingly modern hammer inside. This discovery caught the attention of Carl Baugh, a young Earth creationist who claimed the rock surrounding the hammer dated back to the Cretaceous period. He saw it as evidence against evolutionary theory.
After some investigation, scientists proved that the rock was not as ancient as it seemed. Geological processes have just encased the modern hammer over time, so it wasn't evidence of humans coexisting with dinosaurs like the Flintstones, as some hoped. It was just a case of a miner dropping his hammer centuries ago and nature doing its thing. A Chinese archaeologist supposedly stumbled upon some caves that seemed to serve as a burial ground for small beings with big, oval heads. Alongside these remains, there was rock art depicting figures with round helmets, the sun, the moon, the earth, and stars connected by groups of pea-sized dots. They also found over 700 mysterious stone discs etched with spiral grooves. Things got even weirder when these discs were sent to a Chinese professor who claimed the grooves were actually written characters. According to his translation, the discs told the tale of Dropa visitors from another planet who had crashed their spaceship on Earth about 12,000 years ago and had tried to live among us until they were hunted down by locals. But there's no concrete evidence that any of this actually happened. The story was first published back in the 1960s in a couple of articles, but it all seemed a bit fishy. None of the people involved, the archaeologist, the professor, or even the university they supposedly worked at, seemed to have left any trace in the records. And while there is a group in Tibet called the Dropka, they're fully human, not extraterrestrial visitors, and there's no solid proof that the Dropa Stones exist at all. In a remote part of China, there are some bizarre pipe-like formations known as the Baghdad Pipes. A local explorer found them back in 1996, protruding from Mount Baghdad and along the shores of Tosan Lake nearby. Some people thought they were the work of ancient guests from other planets. When samples of the pipe material were tested, they contained mostly common minerals, but there was a mysterious 8% of unknown stuff. Special testing revealed that these pipes had been there before humans. Chinese geologists later visited the site and suggested that these pipes were formed naturally over time. It could be sediment piling up in the fissures in the earth, or even fossilized tree roots from the area's lush past, but it's not certain. There's a mysterious terracotta head in Mexico with a hard-to-pronounce name, discovered back in the 1930s during a burial excavation. This head looked a lot like fancy Roman statues, so it wasn't clear what it was doing in Mexico. For some reason, the discoverer kept it secret for several decades. The head was found in a pyramid with 3 floors about 40 miles from Mexico City, alongside gold, copper, and pottery. Some argue that if this head really is many centuries old, it could mean the Romans or some other civilization had made it to Mesoamerica before Columbus did. There are also drift voyage theories mentioning a shipwreck after which some artifacts and survivors made it ashore. Some suggest that this figurine head was a little souvenir brought over by the Vikings. But there's no solid archaeological proof of the Vikings meeting the folks in Mesoamerica. There are some artifacts floating around, but none of them have been stamped as undeniable evidence of pre-Columbian contact, so the mystery of how this head ended up where it did remains unsolved. While digging a trench along a river in Romania, workers found a wedge, which is now famous as the aluminum wedge of Ajud, or the object of Ajud. Right next to it, there were some mastodon bones. Those distant relatives of elephants lived 11,000 years ago, so the wedge is probably of the same age. The cool part is that it's made of aluminum, a metal not even discovered until the 1800s. This material requires serious heat to produce. The wedge is also covered in a thick layer of oxide that's been sitting there for hundreds of years. Some folks believe this wedge must have crash-landed here on a spacecraft from some other planet. Some scientists think it's all a hoax, and others suppose it might be a human-made object with an unknown purpose.
There are entire communities of unusual tiny organisms that live in lagoons in Patagonia, and they are some of the first forms of life ever. No one had known about them until 2 scientists, Byron and Maria, went to explore certain areas in Patagonia. Now, Patagonia occupies nearly half of Argentina, and few people live there. Only some farmers and sheep ranchers that mostly stay near rivers and grow things such as apples, pears, and alfalfa. A long time ago, it was a wild and distant place where Indian tribes lived. But this time, we're going to follow the tracks of life forms that appeared long before humans and look closer at these interesting microorganisms Byron and Maria found. Those two had to drive for 9 hours on some rough roads to reach their destination. They stayed in a small village. Only 35 people live there. These people depend on just one spring because it almost never rains there. On the last night in the village, Brian realized that satellite images he had taken had shown a set of lagoons that were only 10 miles away. The next day, the small team jumped into a car and went up the road as far as they could until it became too difficult to drive. They continued hiking the rest of the way. It was hard because they had to carry water to deal with the intense sunlight. In some spots, they ended up sinking up to their knees in a slush made of salt. Up there were 12 lagoons with perfectly clear waters. The place itself didn't offer much except for very acidic and salty water and intense direct sunlight. But it was kind of like traveling back in time, because those conditions were like what Earth looked like many, many years ago. When Brian examined the lagoons, he was surprised to see many unusual microorganisms there. We call them stromatolites, and they're so small we can't even see them without a microscope. But they get together and form large communities. In the past, many unusual species lived this way. For example, cyanobacteria. They were important back in their time because they produced oxygen. Earth, in its initial stages, didn't have much of this gas in its atmosphere. The first stromatolites might have been formed by diverse types of bacteria that didn't necessarily produce any oxygen, but were just living their peaceful life there. They formed layers, piling on top of one another, so that at least some of them could get a bit of sunlight. They used sand and sticky liquids to stay close together. Brian was also incredibly surprised because those were the biggest living stromatolites he had ever seen. Living stromatolites usually grow to be over 3.3 feet high, but the newly found ones were 15 feet wide and a few feet tall, which is giant compared to those living in other places. And fossilized ones were even larger. A long time ago, they could grow bigger than today because there weren't many other species that could eat or harm them. Also, there are many other organisms today that can grow faster and more massive than them and take up their space. That's why stromatolites can only survive in rare places where hardly anything else can live, like in these very salty lagoons located high above sea level in Punta de Atacama. The stromatolites found there are the most famous ones because they might be some of the best examples of the earliest life on our planet. But they're not actually the first form of life on Earth. The oldest of their fossils are 3.5 billion years old, while some other evidence we have tells us that life on our planet appeared around 4.1 billion years ago. Maybe some stromatolites lived back then as well. But Earth has changed a lot since then, and the places where they might have lived haven't survived. Now, all this may not seem like a lot at first glance, because no one has found an exotic and weird beast our world has never seen. But these are notable examples of what searching for life somewhere else in the universe might look like. Scientists who are interested in studying Mars often come to this place, since it might be similar to what the red planet looked like an exceptionally long time ago. If there were fossils hidden in the ancient rocks on Mars, they might look like these stromatolites. Another faraway land has revealed some of its secrets. It's Antarctica, with an ancient lost world found under its ice. Antarctica hasn't always been this frosty, isolated land of snow and ice sheets. Once it used to be part of the Gondwana supercontinent, together with what is now South America, Africa, Australia, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Indian subcontinent. But at some point, it split off and went to build a life on its own. It formed as other landmasses started to move away, which created its coastline. But Antarctica was different in many other ways back then too. It used to be a land covered in magnificent forests and rivers full of life. Scientists used radar and satellites to explore a mysterious world hidden under the ice there. This ancient land, which is close to the Indian Ocean, is as big as the U.S. state of Maryland or Belgium. It's more than 14 million years old. Some studies say that this area formed over 34 million years ago, which was way before Antarctica got into its deep freeze. At first, temperatures there were higher, possibly like the weather in Patagonia or the cold, temperate rainforests of Tasmania, New Zealand, or maybe even more tropical than that. But as the climate became cooler, small glaciers started forming on hills close to the rivers. Valleys sunk deeper because of all that ice covering them. And then, temperatures dropped even lower, and a giant layer of ice covered the entire continent, hiding those old glaciers. Rivers shaped this lost world a long time ago, way before it ended up covered in ice that's almost 2 miles thick in some spots. Scientific studies of this area showed that those landscapes had been full of highlands and mountains. The ice that formed over Antarctica made the whole area very cold, so the landscape couldn't erode anymore. This means everything has remained basically the same and untouched under the ice for millions and millions of years. What's interesting is that we know less about this land hidden under the ice than about the surface of Mars. One way to explore it would be to drill through these ice sheets to check for samples of sediments below. They could tell us more about the ancient flora and fauna frozen underneath. It's not a new method. A similar method was used to collect 2-million-year-old samples in Greenland. Australia has a secret world too. Ancient organisms were found hidden in rocks in the northern parts of the continent that are about 1.6 billion years old. These microscopic things are part of a family called eukaryotes. The members of this family that exist today include plants, fungi, animals, and even those tiny organisms with just one cell, such as amoeba. All living things with nuclei in their cells, including us, can trace their family tree back to one of the oldest members of this family. That one is called the last eukaryotic common ancestor, and it lived more than 1.2 billion years ago. Those ancient organisms were more complex and bigger than bacteria. Maybe they were the first predators on Earth, hunting bacteria.
Everyone loves a good landmark. The Roman Colosseum, the ancient city of Machu Picchu, the Giza pyramids. But have you ever wondered how it once looked? Way back in the days when they were built? Or even in the time they were covered in ivy and forgotten by humanity? Buckle up, because we're heading on a time travel adventure to the world's greatest archaeological sites. Our voyage begins in South America, deep inside the Peruvian mountains. Behold, the city of Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is a monument to the ingenuity and power of the Inca civilization. During its prime, the Inca civilization stretched 2,500 miles along South America's coastline from modern-day Ecuador all the way down to Chile. And Machu Picchu was located at the heart and center of it. The historic site was constructed at around 7,000 feet above sea level, more or less around 1450 BCE. The gated city consisted of around 150 buildings made of stone. The Incas managed to build temples, houses, and even a complex aqueduct system to irrigate the entire town. And yes, they did all that without the help of wheels or any instrument made of iron. The housing model is somewhat similar to stone houses we see nowadays, with the difference that the Incas didn't use any cement to stick together the blocks of stone. Yet, they fit seamlessly on top of each other. Not only that, the Incas must have developed a rudimentary yet effective anti-earthquake technology, since, in the event of a quake, the rocks would shake without falling out of place. If Machu Picchu had been built today, it would have cost over $70 million to finish the entire thing. The purpose of the site is still a mystery to many historians. Theories suggest that it could have been built as a ceremonial site, a safety base for the Inca people, or even a retreat for royalty. What we know for a fact is that in the 16th century, 100 years after Machu Picchu was built, its population abandoned it, with tree roots taking over the majority of the site and keeping it hidden from humankind for over 4 centuries. It wasn't until the 20th century that the world was reintroduced to Machu Picchu when a Peruvian farmer led Yale University professor Hiram Bingham III to visit the site. Since then, Bingham and many other explorers dedicated their lives and research to studying the archaeological wonder of Machu Picchu. Now, for the next stop on our time-traveling vehicle, the city of Pompeii in Italy. Pompeii has crowded our collective imagination for many years. The eruption of the Mount Vesuvius volcano in 79 AD and the destruction of an entire city is hopefully not something that will happen again. But I bet you're wondering, what did Pompeii look like on its last day? It took 18 hours for Pompeii's streets, markets, houses, and forums to be buried under millions of tons of volcanic ash. Thanks to some clever scientists, we discovered that the lava and ashes that covered Pompeii on its very last day actually helped to freeze the city in time. Different from ice, the cloud of ashes did not preserve the city intact, but as the items disintegrated over 2,000 years, they left voids under the earth. Archaeologists found that if they filled these voids with plaster, the shape of the buried city would soon reveal itself. And that's exactly what happened. Of course, it was nothing like the bustling city of 12,000 people that had existed for many years before the fateful eruption. Pompeii was a vibrant and rich municipality. The site's ruins revealed that many areas of Pompeii boasted impressive houses, some with balconies, which was a sign of great wealth at the time. And, believe it or not, even some artwork survived the eruption. Archaeologists found well-preserved frescoes and murals of mythological creatures, all indicating that members of the high society lived there. Ruins show the city even had thermal baths and showers made with luxurious materials. Oh, and apparently, the people of Pompeii had amazing teeth. Yes, archaeologists could see even that tiny level of detail from the plaster molds they recovered from underground. Still in the Italian territory, we find one of the world's biggest tourist attractions, the Roman Colosseum. It was built as an amphitheater during the reign of Emperor Vespasian, around 70 AD. It wasn't until 80 AD that Vespasian's son, Emperor Titus, inaugurated the Colosseum. The monument was something to behold, with 157-foot-tall walls, over 80 entrances, and the capacity to host 87,000 people. All social classes and groups were welcome at the Colosseum, and this partly explains why it flourished for so many centuries. During the decline of the Roman Empire, around the 6th century AD, the Colosseum started being neglected and abandoned. The monument was looted, and some of its columns and stones were used to build infrastructure elsewhere. Only 1/3 of the original Colosseum still remains, and if it's big now, imagine what it once was. Greece was home to one of the world's largest empires. At the height of this empire, literally and historically speaking, more or less 2,400 years ago, the Greeks built a citadel known as the Acropolis. The Acropolis, which is composed of historical buildings, is considered to be one of the biggest landmarks of Western civilization to date. Tourists that visit the capital city of Athens today may be faced with yellowish and broken pillars of the Parthenon, standing way up high in one of the city's hills. But way back when it was built, between 447 and 432 BCE, the imposing and majestic Parthenon was purely white, as the entire monument was built with gleaming white marble. The statues inside were made of gold. The Parthenon is a 23,000 square foot temple held up by 69 marble columns. The largest blocks of marble are massive, weighing around 10 tons each. And the most surprising fact is that the marble didn't come from Athens, but from a nearby site that stood 10 miles from the Acropolis, known as Mount Pentelicon. Historians intrigued by where the primary material for building the Acropolis came from found tiny and big blocks of marble all scattered around the floor of Mount Pentelicon. There was also a paved road that the Greeks had built to carry the rocks around. But perhaps the most impacting monument of all times is located at the heart of the Middle East, outside the Egyptian city of Cairo. The pyramids are considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Giza Pyramid Complex was built as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu around 4,500 years ago. Between 20 to 30,000 people took part in the construction process. It's composed of 3 pyramids. The massive monument is made out of approximately 8,000 tons of granite and over 550,000 tons of mortar, which gives it the appearance it has today. Would you believe me if I told you that the pyramids didn't always look like this? Far from it. They were shiny white with a golden triangular tip at the top. This is because the Egyptians used over 6 million tons of limestone to cover the entire rocky, step-like structure. all so that they could gleam white under the unforgiving sunlight of Egyptian skies. The Pyramid of Khufu remained the tallest structure on Earth made by humans for over 3,800 years. It was the only 8-sided pyramid in Egypt and was believed to align with Orion's belt. It's considered to be the most aligned construction facing north. In 1979, it was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Let's head on down to the Indian city of Agra to quickly visit the Taj Mahal. You may know it as the Taj, but it can also be called by its more endearing name, a teardrop in the cheek of time. The Taj took over 22 years to build and was commissioned in 1632 by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan as a declaration of love for his third and favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal. It was made with ivory white marble, and amazingly, due to tight conservation, it still remains very similar to what it was when it was built. I think all this talk of landmarks got me thirsty for some traveling. What about you? Tell us in the comments below if you've ever visited some of these sites, or which interesting landmarks you'd add to this video.
Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama, but instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos. That'd be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boskop Man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boskop Brainiac was so much smarter, why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much. So, maybe the Boskops spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing. We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boskops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Kasarabe people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Kasarabe people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the Richat structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on trade goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? The beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world. And it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching. Scientists found a new statue on Easter Island, inside the crater of an old volcano. They were sure they already cataloged all the Moai. That's what they call those famous stone giants. But this discovery changes what we know about them. First of all, the Moai were rarely alone, so we may hear about more of them in the same area. Second, it's the first Moai found at the bottom of a lake. Scientists were working on a project to restore the marshland in the volcano's crater when they stumbled upon the statue. The lake that was here began to dry up in 2018. For at least 200 or 300 years, it was almost 10 feet deep, so it would be impossible for humans to build or put a statue on the bottom. Scientists think the Moai are over 500 years old. It's possible that the Rapa Nui people who built them probably brought the statue here when the lake was dry in the past. The new find turned out to be slightly over 5 feet tall, which is smaller than the other statues on the island. It's a full-bodied one with recognizable features. Researchers also plan to do radiocarbon dating to find out the exact age of the statue. They don't plan to remove it from where it was found because the oldest members of the Rapa Nui community want it to stay where it is. Moai statues kept scientists puzzled for centuries. They knew that they were built as a dedication to the island's chiefs, but no one could figure out why they chose these various locations for the statues. Most of them were found along the coast of the island. Researchers from Binghamton University in New York decided to study the locations more closely and learned that it had to do with water. Easter Island has porous volcanic soil that absorbs rain easily, so there aren't enough streams or rivers and too little fresh water. Hundreds of years ago, the island's people relied on groundwater discharge to get drinking water. The water stored deep underground in rock or soil layers, called aquifers, reach a point where it flows up to the surface. When this underground water emerges near the coast, it mixes with the salty seawater, but the salt level remains low enough that the water is safe to drink. The islanders used to collect this water directly from the spots where it flowed out. And it looks like that's why they built the Moai along the coast, right near their most important water source. The main bodies of most of the statues were made of volcanic tuff from a local quarry in what used to be a volcano. This material is easy to carve, but not so easy to transport. That's probably why researchers found over 300 unfinished Moai back in the quarry. The rest of them stand in various locations, facing the villages. It looks like the statues were carved lying on their backs. Then, their sculptors detached them from the rock, moved them downslope, and set them in a vertical position to finish the work. When it was done, it was time to move the statue to its platform. And we're talking about moving statues that weighed around half as much as a single-story, unfurnished house without a car or any modern equipment for 3 miles. The locals must have invented some original transportation method. Scientists tried to recreate it and pulled Moai replicas on wooden sleds. They thought someone would have used palm trees for that purpose, but this theory has been debunked. The most successful experiment so far was wielding ropes to rock the statue down the road in a standing position. This sounds legit, because the local Rapa Nui legends mention that the Moai walked from the quarry. And of course, they needed a good road to get there. In the early 20th century, researchers Catherine Rutledge found an 800-year-old road network on the island. It was a bunch of pathways around 15 feet wide going from the quarry. She thought that those roads were ceremonial and not built just for the statues. She wasn't a famous scientist back then, so others mostly ignored the theory. Several decades later, famous Norwegian adventurer and archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl published his theory. He mentioned that the roads were there exclusively to transport the Moai, and some of the statues were dropped along the way for some reason. But in 2010, researchers found that the statues reached their final destinations because they were all set on hidden platforms. The road floor was U-shaped, so pulling massive statues along them wouldn't be easy. You can still find roughly 15 miles of these roads on the island, and see them from satellite images. Scientists used to believe that the Rapa Nui people made Easter Island unlivable and ruined their own civilization. But a new study that used remote sensing data and machine learning says that the island's population didn't grow too big and collapse. Instead, the islanders figured out how to live in this challenging place and kept their population small and steady for hundreds of years. Researchers found amazing rock gardens as proof for this new theory. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is one of the most remote places on Earth where people live. It's surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. Central Chile is 2,200 miles to the east of it, and French Polynesia is 2,600 miles to the west. The island, which is 63 square miles in size, is made entirely of volcanic rock. But the volcano stopped erupting a long time ago. So, Rapa Nui's soil has lost most of the useful nutrients that lava once brought here. It's also drier than tropical islands, and its deep waters made fishing much harder for the settlers, as there's no shallow lagoons or reefs to fish in. So, the islanders came up with a smart farming method called rock gardening to survive here. They spread rocks of different sizes over the soil and planted crops like sweet potatoes and taro between the rocks. The rocks protected the plants from harsh winds and salty air and helped regulate the soil's temperature. They also slowly released minerals into the soil, so it became healthier for growing food. Some islanders still use these gardens, although they don't produce a lot of food. People in places like New Zealand, the Canary Islands, and the US Southwest have used similar techniques to grow crops in uneasy environments. While scientists are solving Easter Island mysteries, the island itself is teaching them something new about how the Earth's mantle works. For years, they thought it moved like a slow conveyor belt, carrying tectonic plates along with it. But a new study by geologists from Cuba, Colombia, and the Netherlands is challenging this idea. They used a special method called zircon dating to figure out the island's age. Zircons are tiny crystals that form when magma cools, and they have traces of uranium inside that turns into lead over time. So, the scientists measured this change to tell the age of zircons. And they were shocked when they saw that some zircons were way older than expected, around 165 million years old. The island itself is only 2.5 million years old. The scientists found that these ancient zircons came from deep inside the mantle, under the tectonic plate, by magma from earlier volcanic activity. Easter Island's volcanoes are part of a group called hotspot volcanoes, formed by hot plumes of rock rising from deep within the Earth. Normally, these plumes stay in one spot while the Earth's crust moves above them and creates a chain of islands, like Hawaii. But the discovery of ancient zircons on a younger island shows there's more going on deep underground than we thought. Research showed that 165 million years ago, a giant volcanic plateau existed where Easter Island is now. But 110 million years ago, it sank under Antarctica because of tectonic subduction. Ancient zircon minerals stayed put and didn't travel away with the mantle conveyor belt. So, it looks like the mantle near hotspot plumes doesn't flow as much as scientists used to think. It stays still. This new idea could lead to big changes in how we understand plate tectonics and how the Earth's inside moves over time.
Waves are crashing higher than ever before, about to swallow one of the world's most mysterious islands. By 2080, rising seas could crash all the way up to Ahu Tongariki. It's the famous ceremonial platform on Rapa Nui, aka Easter Island. Unfortunately, that's not just a guess. Researchers at the University of Hawaii at Manoa have already run the numbers and shared their findings in the Journal of Cultural Heritage. Their study shows that up to 51 other cultural landmarks, including the iconic Moai statues, could face flooding. But before we get to all that drama, let's learn more about Rapa Nui itself. This is the original name of Easter Island. People from Polynesia settled there way back, around 300 CE. Once they made themselves comfortable, they started creating their own wild and creative culture. Between the 10th and 16th centuries, they built massive ceremonial platforms called ahu and huge statues called moai, made to honor ancestors. Those giant figures still stand today, giving the island a mysterious vibe. Rapa Nui National Park protects all this. It's a Chilean wildlife area, the heart of Rapa Nui culture. The architecture and sculptures here are totally unique, even compared to other Polynesian islands. Easter Island is super remote, literally the farthest inhabited island in the world, sitting 2,300 miles from mainland Chile. The island covers 64 square miles, and the World Heritage Site takes up about 27 square miles, including 4 tiny nearby islets. Rapa Nui National Park is full of archaeological treasures. Experts estimate there are about 900 moai, more than 300 ahu, and thousands of other structures for farming, funerals, houses, and daily life. The moai are incredible. Some stand 6.5 feet tall. Others reach almost 66 feet. Most were carved from yellow-brown lava using simple basalt tools called toki. Some moai were still being carved. Some were being moved to their final ahu, and some were torn down and re-erected. The quarries, like Rano Raraku, show us today how the carvings were made. The ahu come in all shapes and sizes. The biggest is Ahu Tongariki, with 15 moai lined up on top of it. Most ahu have a raised platform of carefully worked stones, a ramp, often paved with smooth beach pebbles, and a flat area in front. Rock art is everywhere. You can find pictographs and petroglyphs in all kinds of styles. Caves hide even more carvings. Even villages, farms, and other structures are super interesting. By the 16th century, according to studies, the Rapa Nui society faced a big crisis. Natural resources ran low. The culture started to change. Many of the megalithic monuments were ruined. The ancestor cult was replaced by the man-bird cult. It was centered in Orongo by the Ranokau volcano. There are 54 semi-underground stone houses there, all shaped like ellipses and decorated with carvings about birds and fertility. This cult lasted until the mid-19th century. It's probably no wonder that colonization brought huge changes. Livestock, forced relocation, and diseases cut the native population to barely over 100 people. Today, the island is home to descendants of the original Rapa Nui people as well as immigrants. They try to keep the culture and still live in the modern world. Sadly, all that heritage might be lost soon, for good. And if nothing is done, rising seas could put Rapa Nui's UNESCO World Heritage status at risk. Scientists say that knowing these risks are just the first step. If we actually realize what's happening, we can figure out how to protect ancient monuments. The team wanted to see just how bad rising seas could get for Rapa Nui. So, they built a digital twin of the island and ran insanely detailed computer models to track waves along the shore. Then, they stacked those flood maps on top of data about all the cultural landmarks which they got thanks to local partners. They wanted to see which ones would get hit first. The results were pretty intense. Sea level rise is threatening coastlines everywhere, but the question now is when and how bad. The researchers' timeline shows that waves could crash all the way to Ahu Tongariki by 2080. That's the famous platform with the Moai statues, the heart of the island's culture. The data is clear and the clock is ticking. The island's people need to start planning now before the sea starts taking what's theirs. And Easter Island isn't the only potential disaster site suffering from the elements. The old city of Chanchan in Peru is feeling the heat from extreme weather. It used to be the capital of the Chimu Empire and is basically the biggest pre-Columbian city made out of earth in the Americas. The place was super advanced for its time. They had smart city planning, organized society, irrigation systems, and some amazing art. The Incas took over in the 1400s, but the ruins still show how sophisticated the Chimu were. It's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's really important. And now, El Niño, the warm phase of a natural climate cycle called El Niño Southern Oscillation, brings both heavy rains and long droughts to this place. These ups and downs have happened forever, but now they occur more often. Besides, rising groundwater is making the buildings unstable. To fight this, people are controlling the water table, fixing walls, documenting the architecture, training locals, raising awareness, and making disaster plans. Storms and shrinking sea areas are also causing problems for the 19th century whalers settlement on Herschel Island in Canada. It's so bad that buildings had to be moved inland to stay dry and avoid flooding. If erosion keeps going, locals might have to move them even more, and some structures are likely to be abandoned. Permafrost is also breaking down graves, which makes buried caskets topple and break. If we move to the mosque city of Baghdad in Bangladesh, we'll find that water and salty soil are wrecking stone buildings. Salt gets into the rocks and then expands when it gets wet. This causes the stones to crack and crumble faster. And this place is a UNESCO World Heritage Site too. It contains 360 mosques, public buildings, water tanks, mausoleums, bridges, roads, and other public buildings. People once constructed them from baked brick. Another place potentially in danger from rising seas and stronger waves is coastal Great Britain. There, weather conditions are threatening lots of historic castles. Hurst Castle in Hampshire, Tintagel in Cornwall, Peel Castle in Cumbria, Bayard's Cove Fort in Devon, Garrison Walls in the Isle of Scilly, and Kelshot Castle in Southampton all face danger. English Heritage says they need to fix walls and build stronger defenses to stop storm damage. Heavy rains and extreme weather are also hitting Edinburgh in Scotland. Flooding and landslides are a serious growing risk. Since 1970, annual rainfall has gone up 13%. The sandstone repeatedly gets wet and dries, which wears down Edinburgh Castle and erodes the volcanic rock it stands on. Is it going to topple one day? If nothing is done soon, time will show, I guess. Another super famous and touristy place that might get flooded soon is Venice in Italy. Its lagoon faces a serious threat from rising sea levels. Flooding is becoming more and more common. This puts the city's buildings and streets at risk. So, as you see, the problem of Rapa Nui aren't unique. Other coastal places like Hawaii face the same threat from rising seas. Ancient temples, sacred burial grounds, and other irreplaceable cultural sites are at risk, just like the Moai and ceremonial platforms of Easter Island. The rising waters don't just threaten buildings, they put the history, traditions, and identity of entire communities in danger. Researchers are using data on coastal flooding to predict what could happen to Rapa Nui and other historical spots. They're mapping the risks, studying how seas will rise, and searching for ways to protect those precious places. The clock is ticking, and without action, some of the most sacred and ancient sites could be lost forever.